Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Committee of the Whole for Monday, March 21st. I will now call tonight's meeting to order and begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the territories of the Sooke and Sioux nations. Before we get into the agenda, there are just a few housekeeping items for members of the public that are here with us today. First off is we don't have a working water closet or washroom or facility on this floor. So if you are in the need of a facility, if you could please reach out to one of the staff members, they will take you down to a working facility. This is currently under renovation. Don't even want to try to go there. The second piece is that there is no vaccine passport required for local government, so it's completely up to yourselves if you wish to wear a mask or not to wear a mask. I'll leave that with you. I believe the mask mandate is dropped though, so I don't even really need to say that, except that there's no vaccine passport, as you all know, because we didn't ask for one. Okay, so on that note, council, we're sitting as a committee of the whole, so just a reminder, we just need one mover for any motion. And you could just, to get my attention, if you just call out, I probably recognize your voices by now, but we'll see. Okay, so we'll get into our agenda and I'll look for a motion to approve tonight's Committee of the Whole meeting agenda as circulated. Moved by Councillor Lajeunesse. Any comments, Councillor Lajeunesse, on the agenda? Seeing none. All those in favor, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you. First off tonight, we have one delegation and I'm pleased to welcome our school board chair from School District 62, Mr. Ravi Parmar, to the microphone. It's my understanding that you would like up to 15 minutes to present tonight?
Not an hour.
Not an hour, no. No.
15 minutes sounds good there.
15 minutes would work for you? Okay. So when you get started there, if you could just please turn on the microphone. Do you have any of your other trustees in the room with you?
Doesn't look like it, but I'm sure there some of them are dialing in virtually.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Parmar, and thanks for being with us tonight.
Okay. Well, I'm so sorry that I have to have my back to all of you wonderful friends, but it's really nice to be here. This is one of the first in-person meetings that I've had an opportunity to participate in the last little while. Haven't had to wear my mask, but I also appreciate that for a lot of us, it's going to take a little bit of time to gradually transition back into all the things that we've been used to doing. And I'm glad that one of the first opportunities I get a chance to get out and about is come and speak to you. And so I do want to begin by just thanking the mayor for her leadership and for the invitation to be able to present to council. It has been a few years since I think someone has sat in this chair on behalf of the board to be able to update you on all the great things that are happening in our schools. And I also want to recognize that while a lot of the presentation is going to be about all the exciting things happening, I do want to acknowledge that there's some challenging things that we've all had to go through during this pandemic, and floods and fires. And of course, our thoughts are with the people of Ukraine, with what's happening with the conflict in that nation. And I too want to acknowledge that I hope everyone is doing well. I hope everyone's families are well. And I want to thank you as council and the entire community here for your incredible leadership that you've shown as a community. It's certainly something that we as a school district look to as partners within your community. Before I go any further, I do also want to begin. There we are, with an acknowledgement of the traditional territories. And so I'm so honored, as we all are, to be joining you this evening on the traditional territories of the Sioux First Nations. And as well, I want to also acknowledge the three nations that SD62 works with directly in our schools. The Sioux Nation, including the Sioux Nation, Beecher Bay, as well as the Pachadat Nation. Nichalnath, and thank them for sharing their beautiful lands with us. And also the honor of working with us as stewards of the beautiful lands that we share together. Oh, sorry, it looks like it's going a little bit quicker than I would want it to. Okay, a lot quicker than I wanted to. There we go. That's the slide I'm looking for. So these wonderful people that some of you probably know are our Board of Education. And so I'm really incredibly honored as all of you are ending your term to have worked with these individuals for the last 4 years. And I just did the math as I was sitting in the bleachers there. Over 100 years worth of trustee experience from our Board of Education. And so we've got Bob Beckett, who I have the honor to serve as the Vice Chair for the Board of Education. And you can't have enough Bobs, so we've got two of them. There's Bob Phillips from Otter Point. We've got Allison Watson, Margot Swinburneson. Bob, Allison, and Margot are your Milnes Landing trustees. So they're elected out here in the Sooke, the Juan de Fuca electoral area. And then, of course, we've got Wendy and Diana, both long-serving trustees from the Belmont zone, the West Shore zone. And what I'll share is, and I'm sure you guys have experienced this over your time as elected officials as well. In many cases, you may not know each other when you're first elected. And so it's kind of sometimes can be random, like, you know, you get elected and then there's 7 people who know nothing about each other in the room. And that was the case for me over 7 years ago when I was first elected. I didn't know any of the trustees. And I think, you know, what I'm reminded of is we may not agree on everything, but we certainly have this common shared values system. And for us in the Sioux School District, that's ensuring that we have the most quality, you know, the best education we can for all of our students. And that's something that the 7 of us, that we've gotten older over the last 4 years, especially me, are reminded of each and every day is that value. And that's something that we've kept closely to us and in our hearts throughout the last 2 years in particular, throughout this pandemic. I want to start off the presentation by just talking a little bit about our district strategic plan, which I see is also the District of Sioux's strategic plan is on the agenda this evening, which I commend you for. Strategic. No point of order there. No point of order. Thank you, Councillor Beddoes. What I'll say is the Sioux School District just implemented its second strategic plan, which was quite an exciting process to go through. Quite challenging during a pandemic, I might add. There wasn't that same level of engagement. We're not all able to be here in the same room, but the pandemic reminded us of some of the systemic challenges we face as communities. And so as a board, as a community, through our partner groups, we put in the hard work, and we're really proud of our strategic plan, which I've got copies for you here this evening. Throughout the process, we developed as a board vision, mission, and values and belief statements, which you'll see in the plan. And through that work, staff, as well as all of our partner groups, came up with 3 strategic priorities based around learning, engagement, and growth, as well as a whole host of number of goals underneath those strategic priorities. It's something that we're incredibly proud of, and it's going to be the work that's going to drive us. It's going to be our roadmap over the next several years as we do our part to be able to help this district grow into the place we want our students to succeed. I'll also highlight, as part of our strategic plan, we're incredibly pleased to be able to go through the process of renewing our Natsuma Indigenous Education Agreement. For those who don't know, the Natsuma Indigenous Education Agreement is a process that every school district goes through as ordered by the Ministry of Education, the Government of British Columbia. We are going through our process for a second time, and I do want to acknowledge on the slide there, as part of that, we're going to be engaging with nations, but we're also going to be engaging with communities as well. And the board wants to be able to extend an invite to all of council, as well as our community, to be able to engage in a community dinner gathering with our nations, with our friends and family, April 11th at Cecino's Elementary. We're just ironing out all the details and the specifics like time, but more invitations will come, and folks are interested, it'll be available on our district website as well. One of the reasons why I think what led me to be here was an MOU that was signed between council and our board just over a year ago, I believe. And I'm reminded of the importance of how we can all work together. And I know that this pandemic has reminded us on the importance of working together. And I was really pleased that the mayor and I were able to sign an MOU on behalf of our councils, our boards, talking about how we can how we can come together in a way that maybe we haven't before, how we can share our common values around the importance of community spaces, public spaces, how schools are not just venues for learning 8 to 4, but also venues where our seniors use spaces, our soccer clubs are using them after schools and on weekends. And so I'm incredibly excited about the work that's ahead. I know that we're just wrapping up our terms, but I think at a foundational piece, you as a council and we as a board have done good work in terms of establishing an MOU that will help future councils, future mayors, future board chairs and boards establish good, strong working relationships in the years ahead. And we'll have examples to talk about in our presentation. You guys are all from Sooke, so I'll very quickly go over this slide. We have several schools here in Sooke: John Muir, Poirier, Saanich, Sooke, Journey, and Edward Milne. And just next to each of the schools, I have the FTE, which is essentially the enrollment of each of the schools. And so we have almost about 12,000 students in the Sooke School District, just under 12,000, and 2,300 plus of them are from the Milne's Landing Zone, or Sooke proper, as we like to call it. Now, I know that it wouldn't be a presentation to council if it wasn't a conversation around capital, but I do want to highlight some impressive work that's happened in our district over the pandemic, especially the last year in particular. At each of our schools, we've made significant investments to ensure that we continue to keep them healthy and safe, but also fun. Because fun is important for our kids as well. And so I want to highlight in particular, there's a whole host of lists at Sooke Elementary in particular. We've just gone through the process of replacing the roof. Anyone who drives by Sooke will also see the great paint job that's happened there. I know that there's a sense of pride from the students and staff at Sooke at how their school is looking. Cecino's, if you want to have some fun and reimagine that you're a toddler or someone in elementary school, you can go and play on their new nature kindergarten playground. Cecino's also offers the nature kindergarten program. And so we're really appreciative of the local PAC there that worked with us. They fundraised a lot of dollars to be able to establish a new PAC there that I know is not only being utilized by the students at the school, but also family members and community throughout the weekends and the evenings as well. We've got the safe pathway and trail system that is transferring students from Poirier Elementary through the Sun River development. I know that is something that something that council has been working on for a number of years. I know that there's a little bit more work to go on this process, but I just want you to know that how appreciative we were as a school board to hear around council's desire to ensure that we can create these safe pathways so our students are just not reliant on mom and dad or grandma or grandpa for driving them to school, or not just reliant on our bus transportation systems, but a whole host of transportations. Last one I'll highlight, because I just noticed the clock in front of me counting down, is EMCS, the theater seat replacement. I want to thank you on behalf of our board for your contributions towards that project. It should be wrapping up very soon, and we hope to be able to host you at EMCS in those new theater seats very soon. I'll just highlight very quickly, we talk a lot about issues, we talk a lot about challenges, but there's some incredibly amazing things happening in our schools. And I'll just very quickly highlight, we held the South Island Regional Canadian competition, and Sooke students were amazing. We had students in Gearbots. Now I cannot explain to you what Gearbots is, but I will share that Journey has an amazing robotics program. And so if you guys are interested in checking it out, we'd love to have you, but they're on the map for that, and they're obviously winning some awards as well. But piping, welding as well, and we know that we're going to need 1 million jobs in the next decade, and we're creating those well-educated citizens and future electricians, plumbers, and framers in our schools. But also at our elementary level as well, I also want to acknowledge the kindness ninjas as they're referred to, the students at John Muir, who when supporting people when they're most vulnerable, when they're visiting their doctors or in a medical clinic, the kindness ninjas were kind enough to be able to brighten the day of patients in Sooke doctors' offices with these beautiful art designs. And I know that there was a story done in the Mirror on it. as well. It just speaks to the importance of teaching kindness in our schools and creating these well-informed, educated citizens who are there to help one another. And as well, something that everyone should be proud of in our community is our EMCS students who are supporting those in our community who are most vulnerable, supporting those who may be facing financial challenges and need that extra support in terms of accessing the food bank. And I know that I'm hoping I can make this pitch this evening to everyone in the room that EMCS students will be beginning their collection of donations for the food bank as part of their Spring Out of Hunger campaign. I hope that just gives you a quick limelight into the amazing things that are happening in our schools. And a lot of these are student-led initiatives as well. So for the second half of my presentation, I'm going to go very quickly, but I know that you all have this deck. The Sioux School District, and I love saying this, is the fastest growing school district per capita in the province, something we're very proud of. It comes with challenges, but I would rather be in a school district that's opening schools than closing schools, because I know that there are a lot of rural and interior school districts that certainly not in the last year or so, because we know that there's a lot of communities that are being flooded with people because of connectivity as well as the pandemic. But there are many school districts that have faced challenges with having to close schools. We're becoming more diverse. We have just about 2,000 staff, an operating budget of $150 million, hundreds of millions of dollars in assets, arguably billions of dollars in assets when you talk about all of our schools, as well as responsibility for a capital budget as well. And very briefly, I just want to talk a bit about how we can work together on the capital side, because I know that there's many questions that come from council as well as community members around the importance of building new schools and infrastructure. And so that begins with us this conversation this evening, as well as Norm, who is fantastic, by the way, and the entire team here at the District of Sooke, and working with our staff, our Secretary Treasurer Harold Cull and Superintendent Scott Stinson, and developing a plan and obviously looking at enrollment and how we can, of course, build a new capital plan that we can make the case to the Ministry of Education for funding. Holy smokes, I've only got a minute left. I hope the mayor won't cut me off. Maybe she will.
Not when you're talking about our future schools.
Okay, there we go. I got an extra few minutes. My apologies to whoever's next. A big part of the, but I will speed up. Sooke's development is something that we keep an eye on a daily basis. It's something that we struggle with because, as you know, not only is Sooke growing, but Langford's growing as well as Colwood. Metchosin and Highlands not so much, so they're a bit easier. But there's a lot going on around here, and I expect there's going to be a lot more going on when the highway completion is done, as well as other aspects of the community. And so how we develop our plan and how we build new schools all depends on Sooke's growth. And I think it's important for everyone to know that. And so this will be no stranger to you, but District of Sooke's population change between 2016 and 2021 was about 16%. From about the same period in terms of school enrollment, we saw an increase of about 9%, so a bit smaller than the census change. But overall, as an entire district, we grew by 29%, which again is unheard of. And I know that Surrey is used as an example of one of the fastest growing school district. Certainly is. When you talk about the number of students, we have sometimes, I think, the numbers of 1,000 people per month moving into Surrey, which is just crazy when you think about it. Imagine that happening in Sooke or Colwood or Langford. Someone could argue that may be happening in parts of Langford as well if you live there. But it's big, and so for us, our biggest challenge is Surrey is a school district the size of 70,000. We're a school district the size of 12,000. It is a lot easier to fit in 1,000 students in a school district the size of 70,000 than it is to fit in 500 students the size of our school. And we've got some aging infrastructure that we're dealing with as well. This chart will be a little bit difficult for you, for maybe members of the public to be able to see, but maybe not for you councillors and mayor, because you got your screen in front of you. But you can see the seat deficiency challenge that we have as a district across our district. And in particular, I want to highlight the blue line, which is the one that just starts up at the top there on the left side of the screen and then makes its way down. These are our current projections. We are in the process of updating these because of the census data, as well as it's informed by any new projects that may be happening in municipalities. We know that Langford is densifying its core, which may surprise you, is having an impact on us. There are a lot of young families that are moving into those high-rise condos. And so you can see that what we predict, and this is based off of all of the data that we've collected, is by the end of 2034, we will be about 300 seats short of school space for Poirier, Cecino's, Sooke, and John Muir. So this is just looking at elementary level. And so one of the work that we're going to have to do is to ensure that this actually is the trend. We may be completely off. I'll talk a bit about that ahead. There may be future developments that may happen in Sooke. There may be changes to sewer that increase development as well. And so that's why it's so important that our staffs are working together to ensure that we're updating our capital plan, because you can only go to the ministry so many times for money, and we need to be well informed when we're doing so. And you can see that, of course, it's not just in Sooke, but we're having some pretty significant challenges across our district. In the specific, the green one, the Royal Bay Belmont area, that acknowledged the fact that we had just opened up an expansion to Royal Bay Secondary School. But you can see that we're already going to be down well needing a secondary school. Actually, even sooner than that. This data actually, our projections are wrong. We are currently over capacity by a lot for our secondary schools. So secondary school is becoming an even bigger priority for us. This was our capital plan submission in June of 2021. We're hoping to hear from the Ministry of Education fairly soon on it, but you can see that we're asking for a lot. We're asking for a lot of elementary schools: South Langford Elementary School, one in the north, South Colwood, which we kind of call the Royal Bay development, as well as a Sooke area elementary school and a North Langford secondary school. The Sooke area elementary school is specifically designated as land in the Sun River development, but we know in future conversations that we're going to have to get a little bit creative. We may have to look at, is there an opportunity to expand at the school at Sooke Elementary School, for example? Is there opportunities elsewhere as well? And so Sooke area elementary still remains very much a priority for our board. Again, these are not just picked out of a hat. They are all dependent on growth, dependent on data that we receive. And I know this can be, obviously very challenging when you're in a district with Langford and Colwood, but those municipalities are growing faster and it's very hard to keep up. And so that's why it's so important that we work together to be able to make the case to the province to ensure that we're getting the funds needed to be able to build all these schools. Right now, we're opening 2 new schools in West Langford. And once those schools open in September, we will just be at capacity. But I bet you right now, if you ask me on September 10th, we will most likely be over capacity at those schools as well. Crazy to think, but it's just the growth that's happening throughout this region, and it's certainly not slowing down. And so I certainly hope that as a board and a council, we can work together to ensure that we're making the case to our premier, our local MLA, as well as government, to ensure that we get the funds we need to be able to build new schools and infrastructure. And building new schools is just part of it. We're also looking at expanding. We're also looking at replacements as well, because we know that we have some aging infrastructure in Sioux. You can see a picture there with me standing in front of portables. We don't like portables in the Sioux School District. No one likes portables, but we have a lot of them in the Sioux School District. We have about 60. And instead of replacing them with classroom seats, we usually lose them for a year and then they're back. And I know that there's portables out here in Sioux, and there will continue to be until we can build new schools. And funny enough, portables are certainly a way of showing the need for schools. It's just how the ministry operates. They need to see the whites of we joke they need to see the whites of the students' eyes before they can hand you the check to build new schools. But we know that in addition to keeping portables in place, as well as expanding portables, we're going to be replacing, expanding existing schools, as well as catchment review changes. Probably something that's happening more so in the Langford-Colwood area, less so in Sioux. So we have an opportunity over the next several months to develop a new capital plan. The board has certainly provided me direction as chair, as well as all of our staff, to ensure that it's a robust plan. It clearly outlines the challenges we're facing in our community. It is informed by the best data possible. And so that's why it's so important that we're working with Norm and his team, as well as everyone throughout this region. So collectively, we all can go together to the ministry and to government to make the case for future construction dollars as well. And the last piece I'll just flag for you because I'm on my last slide is as part of that, the board is just in the process of developing new guiding principles for new capital projects. This was something that I had brought forward to the board a couple of months ago around giving direction to staff on what type of schools do we want to build. Again, I'm reminded that schools are not just places that operate from 8 to 4. They're community hubs. Edward Milne is a prime example of that, and one that should be used across the province of a school that has its lights on all the time and is easily accessible by the community. We need to do more of that. And so when we're developing new schools, we want to be able to work with council. We want to be able to work with community partners to ensure that these schools are being utilized by the entire community. I think we as a district can do a better job of that. We as a school district can do a better job of that. And so that's why in the weeks ahead, probably after spring breaks, we're giving our families a little bit of a break. We're going to be launching a bit of an engagement using Thought Exchange, a survey tool that we have to be able to ask for people's perspectives. And you'll see a picture just on the screen there. You may not notice, but that's Margot Swinburne. She's got her mask on. We had an opportunity to be able to launch our engagement with our students. And actually, we had students from Edward Milne and Journey participating with students from Langford and Colwood schools, sharing their perspectives on guiding principles, as well as what are the things they like and maybe not like about their current schools. But I'll end there, and I'm probably way over board, and I apologize for that there. But again, I want to thank you for your leadership. I want to thank you for the invitation to be a part of here. I know that for the community, our board and council met for the first time. Arguably, it may have been for the very first time formally. Thanks to Jeff, Councillor Bateman, for chairing and for bailing me out at the end there because I had to leave. But I understand there was a really great discussion, and there was a real understanding of wanting to do this more and hopefully doing it in person. And so I'm certainly hopeful that before the end of this term that we'll have an opportunity to do that. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parmer, for the presentation and for being with us. So staff could forward us the PowerPoint, then council may want to have it on as a future reference. So unfortunately, April 11th is a regular council meeting. So I did receive the invitation to that particular dinner, but unfortunately scheduled meetings. So you'll likely not see us there because then we won't have quorum here, right? A few things, as you know, we've met and talked about our schools numerous times. And while I appreciate the enrollment in the other municipalities of which we share SD 62, the challenge I've always had is the condition and age of our schools. And so I've presented this to every minister since I became elected, that every term that I've sat as mayor, with the exception of this term, there's been a fire at Sooke Elementary. So thankfully, our fire department has been able to address it. They've happened outside of school hours. Damage is minimal. However, it's a fire in a school. And a lot of times, so it's a little distressing for parents. And so I presented those headlines to the ministry because if it's up to the ministry that's not funding the replacement of these schools, then I feel it shouldn't fall on us. We've done everything we can to raise, we have a problem here. There's fires in our schools. You need to do something about it. Despite the enrollment, the schools will continue to age every single year. And Sooke Elementary is now over 100 years old. John Muir and Cecino's are also aging, and none of them meet current seismic conditions. So it's alarming when that's when you're sending your youngest generation of future leaders. The other part is that while Edward Milne sits a bit back off the highway, the three schools are all on a busy highway that's just getting busier and busier. And so it's noticeable this week, I think, for any commuter that traffic is significantly lighter. So a lot of it is, yes, we did have Charters Road shut, even though it's still just a one-way. It's not an all-turn intersection yet. You can't turn back on it. You can't turn left out of Charters. The road is shut, however, just noticeable difference having the schools closed. And I think so I'm wondering if you could speak a bit about how we can start to work more. We've done some pieces on addressing traffic, but there is a school bus driver shortage. I know as a parent, I've already secured and enrolled my seat for September. I've heard that folks that moved here or started that process in June were out of luck. So more parents are needing to pick their children up from school. also making this difficult is there is a complete shortage of after school and out of school care. So the facility I use, very popular, sold out. They didn't even have the ability to open to the public. And I think the other two are the same. They open up to returning first, and every seat was taken by the end of the day. March 1st, sold out for September. So that means that one parent is not working full time. How households choose that, statistically, more women are impacted more so. So that doesn't create the equal environment or the equitable opportunities we all have. It also means that someone or both are both working part-time and therefore not having the flexibility to contribute back to the economy. School pickup, you need to get there by 2:30 because finding places to park is difficult. The parking lots are full and all the traffic is spilling out. So, I mean, I think we can see this in the coming weeks, but that's the challenge that folks have. Summer camp programs are already starting to fill up for the summer. So I was saying earlier, Camp Thunderbird is opening this year. That was super excited. They sold out middle of February for the summertime. Sea Park will be sold out the day that it opens for registration, and the pandemic has disrupted staffing. So pickup time for spring break, it's drop off by 9 and pick up by 3:30. Well, if you're working 8 to 5, how are you going to make that work? So right now, parents are taking spring break off. I don't think they want to, but because they have to, because how else are you going to look after your kids? I had someone say to me, well, people should stop having children. Well, that's the end of humanity. So I don't see that as an option and one to even go near, because it's just not possible. That's our hope for the future beyond anything. I'll leave it at that. So it's just, these are some items, but can you share like what's happening with school bus recruitment, retention? How can we get more buses? How can we help advocate for that? We are doing our piece to get that necessary connection from Sun River to Poye. We put in maybe 3 excellent grant applications. We were funded, we worked with the province, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 to the final phase, they didn't fund it. So kicked up the advocacy on that, but now with all the infrastructure challenges in the province, it's one that we will try to find ways to fund, but it's such a necessary connection. So the traffic, school buses, childcare, the age of the schools.
Did you want me to take some more questions and then respond all together? What would be your preference?
Probably with me, and then I'll go to another question.
Okay, sounds good. A lot there. Well, look, first of all, I'll just start with your comment around the fires in the schools. And I do want to first of all say that the staff in the school district do their absolute best with the dollars that we have to ensure that we keep all of our schools as healthy and safe as it can be. And I'll also acknowledge that there are standards, provincial standards. And so I can confidently say that all of our schools are safe in the Sooke School District. If they weren't, they wouldn't be open. And so I think that's really important to say at the start. We know that there's fires that happen for a whole host of reasons at all schools across the province, but we do our best to ensure that all of our schools are healthy and safe. And I think we're reminded of that during the pandemic when we provided extra facilities teams, extra custodians in our schools to ensure that we were keeping them cleaner on a more regular basis, and something we're hoping to continue to do, but with limited dollars from the province, we've had to cut back, unfortunately, a little bit. Completely agree around the comment on schools and the highways. It kind of goes back to when these schools were designed and built 100 years ago. Who would have imagined that they would have been built right next to a very busy highway with lots of traffic? And so, Mayor, I completely agree. And I think when we have opportunities at replacement, when we have opportunities for seismic upgrades, we're very much looking at that. I know that council and the board had a discussion. When we get to a point when we can make the case to the province and receive funding for replacing Sooke Elementary. Sooke Elementary is a fairly large property, and so there may be an opportunity to build Sooke Elementary to the back side of the school. Obviously, a lot more work would have to happen. We would have to do a geotechnical review and all that sort of stuff, but it would mean that you have one less school off the highway. On the transportation system shortage, we're facing a pretty significant challenge, and I know that's a challenge that all businesses are facing. There is a staff shortage, there is a labor shortage, and it's no different with our bus drivers, and it's no different with our staff in the schools as well. We're desperate for EAs, we're desperate for teachers, we're even desperate for administrators. Funny enough, we're poaching administrators from other parts of the country and the world applying to be able to come to the Sioux School District. And so the board is just in the process of reviewing policy and regulations. One of the things that the board has made very clear is we do want to provide priority to rural communities, to communities that may not have other options, may not be able to rely on, may have BC Transit, may have safe, accessible routes. And so I think you'll see over the next couple of months as those routes come out, a bit more of a priority focused on Sooke as well as the Wanda Fuca electoral area, because those families don't have other options. People in Langford and Colwood do have other options. They have sidewalks. And so that's something that we're working on in terms of our priority. I'll also acknowledge, because Mayor, I know that you're on the BC Transit, Victoria Regional Transit Commission. You've seen me come and present to them many times. Sometimes I sound like a broken record, but BC Transit service in our communities is horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. It doesn't speak to those drivers. It doesn't speak to the people that are riding it. It just speaks to the fact that we need more service. And so I've been going to, for as long as I've been board chair, I think 4 times now annually, to present to Victoria Regional Transit Commission to remind them that bus transit in Victoria is fantastic. Bus transit in Sooke, in parts of Langford and Colwood, in Metchosin, in the Highlands, sometimes non-existent. And it's unacceptable with the level of growth that we're facing out here. It's something I feel very strongly about because I rode those buses when I was traveling from Langford to UVic for 4 years. Not a fun drive, I can tell you that. Also on the safe routes side, we know that there's lots of work happening with the District of Sooke around building new sidewalks as part of development. So we're really pleased to be able to see that. Look, I think whenever we have an opportunity for our students to be able to walk to school, bike, skateboard, scooter, we should celebrate that. And so any opportunities that we can work together, I know that we've been working very closely with the CRD and their Safe Routes to School team to be able to establish reports for all of our schools. My colleague, Trustee Cecino, had an opportunity to be able to watch pick up and drop off at District of Sioux, at the Sooke Elementary School. Pretty scary process. And that happens each and every day, 5 days a week. And so I know that those parents have a rhythm, but we can do a better job. And so we're looking at any ways in which we can work with the CRD as well as the District of Sioux to be able to establish that. To establish better safe routes to school as well as pick up and drop off. Maybe we can look at pick up and drop off at different spots in the community, not just on the school site as an example. Last piece I'll just very quickly touch on, excuse me, is childcare, which is something that I hear without a doubt, especially over the last year. There's probably no bigger issue that I have as a trustee have heard about is childcare. And so I echo your comments, Mayor. We do need to create more spaces. We know that the District of Sooke receives money for to be able to do a bit of an analysis of the deed for your municipality. We're utilizing that data. We're working with the Ministry of Education, as many of you may be aware. Childcare, which formerly was in the Ministry of Children and Family Development, has now been relocated to the Ministry of Education, creating a bit of a stronger tie. Currently, we do offer childcare. But the challenge for us is we've offered lots of childcare opportunities, lots of spaces. We've got lots of programs in our schools, but so over time we've had to evict them simply because we've run out of space. I'll just give you an example at Happy Valley Elementary as an example. I know that Cecino's used to have a childcare program as well, but when you're educating kids, that's got to be the priority. But I acknowledge childcare needs to be a priority as well. And so whenever possible, if there is space on the land and we can stick a portable there, or if there's space in the classroom, we will work with third-party providers to be able to offer childcare. Again, I recognize it's a big issue, but one of the things that we're piloting, we're one of a handful of school districts that are piloting, is a seamless childcare program. It was developed by our partners at CUPE provincially, where essentially we're providing childcare before and after school in our current classrooms. And so how it works is you may have a kindergarten classroom. Right now it's just restricted to kindergarten, but you may have a kindergarten classroom where there are families who are reliant on before and after school childcare. So they may start the day and they come into school maybe at 7:30 or 8 o'clock before school starts, and there's an ECE there to work with them. And then that ECE stays in the classroom, in that same classroom, supports the work that the teacher is going to be doing, because the teacher will come in at 8:30, 8:45. The ECE will leave when their time is up, when a full day of work is done for them, and a new ECE will start. And so there's a bit of a transition over, and that ECE will finish this with the kids at the end of the day before mom, dad, or whoever comes to pick them up. It's something that is quite unique in terms of a program that we have in our district. We're currently piloting it at Millstream Elementary, and we're hoping that it's a huge success because it's utilizing less space. It doesn't require a separate space. We know that we certainly had some challenges with just an understanding of a classroom is not just a space for that teacher or for that class, but a space for all students. And so I'm certainly hoping it's a success. I think have currently about 11 students that are registered in the program, a little bit lower than we had initially wanted, but it's a good place to start. So maybe I'll pause there, and I'll just say that childcare is a huge priority. And I also acknowledge that in the future, as part of our development of guiding principles, we should be utilizing our schools during the summertime as well as spring break for childcare opportunities as well. I know there are third-party providers that can provide that service, or maybe even the district can provide that service, because you're right, work doesn't just stop during spring break or during the summer. Those families need to continue to work to ensure that they can provide for themselves.
Thank you. Thank you, School District Chair Palmer. No, that helps. And I think it's just important that we continually meet to share information back and forth, what we're working on, priorities, so that we can shape our advocacy together. Turn to other counselors for any questions. Councillor Bateman.
Sure. Thanks for that presentation and for co-hosting that MOU meeting last month. I think we have a second one. There's 2 a year. And I know at the end of that meeting, councillors and trustees were excited. We thought, let's get together and brainstorm about the future of Sooke Elementary, whether it happens in a shorter, longer, whatever time frame. There's all sorts of potential with creativity around this. Thank you for the heavy emphasis on BC Transit and advocacy. We have a new Sooke local area transit plan that will be initiated. I know the West Shore plan's been announced as well. I'm curious about the EMCS Society review, and I know that's every 5 years, and in this case 7 years, given the COVID situation. But is EMCS solid as a community school, in your opinion?
Counselor, I had to drop that from my presentation because I had like 25 slides. And so I should have known better, knowing that you're a council, that you would have asked that. Absolutely. We're incredibly excited about the future of EMCS Society. We think it's a model in terms of community schools that can be used in other parts of the province and even other parts of our district. And so Jim Cambridge, who's the former superintendent of our district, who started his teaching career in Sooke at John Muir, just completed that review. I'm happy to provide a copy for you because it was just presented to our board, and we've directed our superintendent to work with EMCS Society on the recommendations in that report.
All else is fine. I do know from your presentation last month that you'd forecasted 206 new students coming into the district for the 2021-22, and 735 actually came in. So I wish you well managing that kind of growth. We're doing our OCP right now, and we understand pressures. This is something else entirely. Thank you.
Councillor Beddoes.
Yeah, I just thank you very much for that presentation, first of all. And again, with our meeting previously, it's nice to have that dialogue between our two groups. I just can't emphasize enough on the Cecino's problem of picking up kids there. It's not only causing congestion, it's increasingly dangerous. I worry every time I pass there around the 3 o'clock mark. It's just absolute bedlam with everybody turning in and out of there. And I'm just surprised that we haven't lost any students. Thank God we got a crossing guard there, but it worries me every single day. So please put that on a very, very high priority. I don't know what you can do, but we need something done with that area. It's just too dangerous. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I completely agree, and I'm really thankful that we've had excellent crossing guards there. Some crossing guards who've even taken the initiative of writing down or taking pictures of license plates of vehicles that have been going way too fast and not monitoring the school zone there. But again, it's very much an issue, and I completely agree with you. When we talk about the importance of having kids walk to school, bike to school, how can you do that when you're at a school at Cecino? So I totally appreciate that, and so we'll certainly work with our staff. And we would welcome any advice from council as well as District of Sioux staff. If you think that there are better ways in which we can manage drop off and pick up, as well as our parking situation, we would certainly welcome that. We don't have any engineers on staff, so we rely on the expertise of community partners like yourself. But I agree, it's definitely an issue.
Councillor Lajeunesse.
Yeah, I think Sooke probably hasn't quite developed in the way that it was anticipated 100 years ago when Sooke Elementary and Cecino's Elementary were situated where they are. And maybe it would be good, before thinking about replacing those schools, about thinking about the placement of them. And by simply moving Sooke Elementary further back on the lot, I don't know that that's going to solve the problem, because there's no practical access from the north side of that site either. So maybe you should be looking at other locations and possibly doing a land swap with current property owners to relocate the schools altogether and put them closer to where development has happened and is anticipated to happen.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor. That's something that we're obviously looking at very closely. As you know, land is not easy to come by, and it's getting more expensive. I know it's not so much an issue in Sooke, but I'll just to give you an example, just to show how crazy it's getting in Langford. When we purchased land for North Secondary School just across from Costco, we bought it about $1.5 million an acre. It's currently valued at $4 million an acre today. It's only 2 years ago. Crazy. And so I take that comment to heart, that whenever possible, ensuring that our schools are easily accessible to the development that's happening, I think is great. And so we'll certainly continue to work with Norm and the development team here, as well as all the staff, to ensure that when there are opportunities to do so, we'll certainly look at it. We know that there are challenges related to that. Certainly we have to go through community engagement whenever we're disposing of a site. And I know that there are many people who may disagree with us in terms of Sooke's placement as well. And so in the future, when we're looking at replacing Sooke, as well as having other discussions around replacing elementaries, middles and secondary schools, it's definitely an option that we consider as part of the process.
Councillor Logans.
Thank you for your presentation. It's always good to collaborate with the school district. It's funny that you mentioned that the EMCS Society is a model, because it's been taken out of the province as a model. And I think it's one of the last ones left. So are you kind of alluding to the province moving back towards a community school vibe, or are you just talking about implementing that in the neighborhood school sort of system they've replaced?
I don't see it happening at a provincial level. I think it's quite unfortunate. Next time I meet with the Minister of Education, I plan on providing her a copy of Jim's report. Because I do think it's a model. I truly believe that there has been this philosophy that after 3:30 or after 4 o'clock, we shut the lights off and schools are done and we lock the doors. If you go to EMCS, if you go to Royal Bay, Belmont, and some of our newer schools, that is not the case. Those schools are being utilized all the time. And there's nothing wrong with that. We may have to pay a little bit more BC Hydro bills or water, but that's the purpose of those buildings, is to be community hubs. And we know for emergency preparedness, that's a big piece. Those schools are utilized. We know for childcare, that's a big piece. We know for sports, for arts, that is such critical work. And so I guess what I'm saying, Councillor Logans, is EMCS School Society is a model that we should use at all of our schools. How we can replicate the MCS Society to our secondary schools, middle and elementary, I'm not sure. I don't have an answer for you today. Someone here may, and I would certainly welcome that. But I think it's a good model. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But it's something that we should utilize and build from each and every day. Thank
Yeah.
you for those
No,
comments.
definitely agree. Another concern that I have actually, the last was not a concern, but a concern that I do have is the amount of gymnasium space, especially for older students in our community. We have the one high school, as you know, so we only have one high school sized gymnasium and the rest are much older or have more child sized features. And need to be used differently. We have some gymnasiums that the EMCS Society can't book soccer in because the walls will fall apart if we kick soccer balls at them. So it really limits the amount of not only after school and community programs that we can offer, but also the amount of programs for your students that can be offered. So lots of students do other programs in the community. Most concerning to myself is that they have to travel outside of the community, leaving their friends, spending time away from their family, spending more time sitting in cars, more road traffic, etc., in order to participate in the sports programs that they want. And the same goes for fields as well. Our fields are lacking compared to other communities. Is there any site in the future where we may get, I understand there are school upgrades that you spoke about. Is there a possibility to have another gymnasium or another or upgrades to these pieces that can improve the lives of our students? Is that something we need to help you advocate, or perhaps can we work with you as a district to create community recreation spaces that will serve us both?
Yeah, great question, and something I hear from families quite a bit in the district of Sioux, as well as throughout the school district. And I'm reminded of the coach at EMCS who gives me a hard time about this topic each and every time I'm at EMCS as well. And so I think of him when you ask that question, because we know that even prior to the new opening of Belmont and Royal Bay, Belmont in particular, we couldn't even host provincial tournaments at any of our schools, where students had to leave and continue to go to Oak Bay and Lansdowne and other schools to be able to participate in provincial tournaments. We're finally able to do that now with Belmont, but I'd like for us to be able to do that with all of our secondary schools. I'll give you one example where we've had a great working relationship with the city of Langford, and that's turf fields. All weather fields. And so whenever we've built a new school, or whenever we've gone through the process of replacing a muddy green field, Langford's come in and contributed dollars towards making it into a turf field. And they've done so because simply we don't have the resources and we don't get the funding to be able to make that. And so when we're building new schools, we don't have the funding to be able to build turf fields. It's essentially a necessity. And if we want to move in that direction, we have to cut from the classroom and the actual school. And because the rules are so tight in terms of the standards, it's next to impossible. And so Langford's been a fantastic partner in coming in and building those turf fields. I think you're absolutely right. There are opportunities for us to look at partnerships like that. Turf fields is an easy one. I know that we've been partners with the Sioux Community Society in contributing towards their turf field as well, but maybe there are opportunities to look at other buildings as well. We know that there's been major upgrades at Sea Park. And so we're really happy to see that as a district. Maybe how can we work with Sea Park a little bit better to ensure that our students are utilizing that infrastructure as well. And maybe we have extra land in certain places where we can look at expansions and stuff. And so to your 2S advocacy, absolutely, it's always important. The Ministry of Education looks at partnerships with municipalities, looks at partnerships with communities when it comes to funding. And to your second part, whenever possible, I know budgets are tight for school districts, and they're also tight for municipalities as well. And I expect you're probably going through your budget process, or will be going through your budget process fairly soon. It's important that we work together to ensure that we're investing in these community assets. And I'll just give a small example that I shared at the District of Sioux Council board meeting was playgrounds. If there's an opportunity for the District of Sioux to be able to contribute to when we're replacing a playground, we can ensure that it's better, it's more accessible, and it's being utilized at all hours of the day.
Thank you. So thank you. I won't keep you much longer. We'll work together on advocacy for the fall for September. I'd like to meet with the new Minister of Education at that time. Meanwhile, though, we are advancing work, as you know, for our new lacrosse box. It's just the weather's not cooperating to get the cement poured, but it's scheduled, so that'll complete. It gives us the opportunity to enter like outdoor rink sports, lacrosse and roller hockey and other fun stuff that I can't think of right now, but certainly it's in the right location. And in terms of hearing about the 2027 date, when would the province typically make that announcement? When would we know if they're actually going to put that in their budget?
So the province just released their budget, as you're all aware, in February, and they hold back the particular capital pieces. We expect to find out very soon what we get. We've been advocating for 2 schools in particular, as you'll see by the dates that was in the PowerPoint, South Langford Elementary and North Langford Elementary. We want to get those done and out of the way so we can move on to the other priorities in our schools. We're thankfully in a position where we've purchased all of our land, and so we're in a good position to essentially start building. And one of the cases that we wanted to make to the province is give us money so we can build multiple schools at a time. It costs less when you have one company and one infrastructure project that's essentially going on multiple sites. And so we've made the case for that with the current schools under construction in West Langford. But I'll be honest with you, Mayor, it's looking dire. The advocacy work that you guys can do will certainly help, but there are a lot of other priorities at the provincial level. I recognize the floods have had a significant impact, and so when we're just looking at building schools, it's looking challenging. The province hasn't come to us and said, we'll help you replace the school. They've certainly given us the understanding that they will only replace one school in the entire province a year. One school in the entire province a year. And that makes it difficult for Sooke, for Millstream, for Cecino's, for Savory, and all of these other schools that have been built in the 40s and 50s to ever be replaced.
Yeah, no, that's frustrating. I will urge you, though, to focus on the lands in Sun River. As Councillor Lajeunesse said, Country Road at the north end is really tight, really narrow. And to move traffic up Gollage or Dover into the backside of Sooke Elementary, it's equally narrow. The residents, it's a tight street. I don't even, like 2 small cars can barely pass each other in those areas. And that will then physically move it to where the residents and where they are. And perhaps there's an opportunity, if it is a Sooke Elementary, to build a proper gym there that could be used by all the students, whether, you know, for the various programs that our school kids needs. It's something, or maybe to advance, as you say, with portables there and some out of school, just to draw attention to the lands. It's a safe access, beautiful neighborhood, lots of outdoor opportunities with proximity to the river. So we'll see what happens there, but we've been banging this advocacy drum every single year that we have. And then it's the case where sometimes the Minister of Education changes and then we have to start all over again, which was the last times. And it gets a bit frustrating because the problem doesn't go away. So we'll continue working on that together. Meanwhile, Sea Park is having success accessing the schools. And so some programs like Taekwondo and the school camps this week and all that are going. So we appreciate the ability to at least provide those, because otherwise there wouldn't be enough. But Sea Park itself is also increasing in demand as well for all of its services and amenities. So while it has added more space, the space is programmed and is taken up. It's just a shortage of it all. So thank you for being with us tonight.
Yeah, thanks. I raised my hands in gratitude for having me, and I will leave copies of our strategic plan here. And I know in debating and discussing your strategic plan this evening, I hope you give consideration to the important role that public education in the Sioux School District plays in the community as well. Thank you so much.
Take good care and drive home safely. And if you could just pass those to Ms. Temple there, she'll be sure that we all have a copy of them at the end. Okay, take good care. Can we? Okay, thank you, everyone. So we're going to move on to our report section of tonight's agenda, starting off with 5.1, which is our strategic priorities chart update. So I'll pass that over to Mr. McInnes, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. As stated in the report, this will be the final strategic priorities chart for the 2018 to 2022 council. This council has delivered on your strategic priorities that you set for yourself in December of 2019. And as I look across at the chart on the wall, many things have been accomplished. Many things are in play right now. And this council has been very strategic in resource allocation. So on behalf of your administration, I'd like to thank council for your guidance, your direction, and providing leadership at this important time in the growth of Sooke. All but one of the council priorities is from the next list on the previous strategic priorities chart. The remaining now item is to perform a follow-up cultural assessment, which we will endeavor to do now that we can get back together as a full body and get beyond COVID, and certainly hope that it doesn't return with any sort of vengeance to prevent that from happening. The list on the screen is not an exhaustive list, but it is representation of the most important items for administration to deliver on in 2022. I will report the progress of these 8 items to council at a committee of the whole meeting in July of this year. With dropping the next items, which typically will be delivered within 12 months, we have expanded the operational strategies section of the chart. So as council is aware, there's 3 major parts to this strategic priorities chart. There's the council priorities, the operational strategies, and the advocacy initiatives. So we did expand the operational strategies in this particular chart. And the process was that each service area were asked to submit their top 3 operational items that were included in the 2022 budget, which Mr. Palmer was adopted in December of last year already. So one of our strategic priorities is actually to have our budget adopted by the end of each fiscal year, and we've been able to do that the last couple of years. So each operational area provided their top 3 projects that are in the budget in order to inform both council and the public on what operational priorities have been identified and will be delivered on in 2022. The advocacy items remain as listed on the screen. This list is getting shorter because some of the former items have been accomplished, but of course, a number of things that council advocates for, the number of things that council advocates for is endless and ever changing. This is a list of items that will remain in front and center, but undoubtedly other emergent items will arise that will require our time and attention to consider. So we've been through this process quite a few times. It's an iterative process. This will be the last for this council. And with that, Your Worship, I'll end my presentation with the recommendation that the Committee of the Whole recommend that Council approve the strategic priorities chart dated March 28th, 2022, and happy to answer any questions that are not in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McInnes. Just one correction we should make is that the federal gas tax program has been rebranded into something else that I never remember the word for. So we call it gas tax, but we should probably update it to Community Works or something.
Noted. Thank you. Yes, we'll change that in the advocacy piece.
Otherwise, it's fine. Any questions from members of council? Go ahead, Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. McInnes, again. One question I have is not public consultation about the sewer expansion project one of these promised actions over the next X months?
Yes, there's a timeline in place, a process in place, and deadlines for us to complete that work in order to determine. So once the grant is accepted, so as you know, there's 2 major pieces to that grant application. Part A for Kaltassin area, Part B for Whiff and Spit area. We've submitted for both areas. If we are successful with both areas, we'll go ahead and engage the communities and make sure that there's a good understanding of the finances between both of those. If we are not successful and we only get part A or part B of that grant, it'll be a different process for us.
Right. So, and when do you anticipate hearing about the grant?
Probably not for a year or so. So we do have some engagement that's going to happen within the next short period of time around process.
Okay.
And of course, one of the big questions that I'll reiterate again with both of those areas, the process is that those that will benefit and pay for that expansion have to get concurrence. So 50% of the population and 50% of the assessed value all have to concur.
Right. Yeah, interestingly, today I got a phone call from a Whiffenspit resident who thought that the sewer project was underway. I think the CRD is putting in some stormwater drainage. So Sooke's minds are alive to this possibility. I'd also like to note under advocacy that the enhanced roadside assessment pilot project, which we've had on our advocacy since the start, continues. And we sent off the latest letter just early this month. So I wonder whether that belongs on that advocacy list still.
Noted as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Bateman.
And my final point is the old school, I don't think you can call them MARMs anymore, but you know, we have to ensure that this document is proper capitalizations. And there's just a few cases where if you have another look, you'll see. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bateman. Any other comments? There's just a few on the advocacy piece is that we paused on the whole file on VIMQ has been paused because ECOM has sort of taken over that whole for the impacted non-participants of VIMQ. We're being hit with the downloaded 911 charges. So that's kind of what's sitting right now. So that's where I think that just needs to be added there. And then some of the other pieces around the regional, municipal and regional hotel tax, a lot of that has been paused because of COVID. So it would be more looking to our partners like CERTA and the Tourism Association to their timelines as to when we can start those conversations again and where those go. And then I think rather than the gas tax funding, a big part of us, many of us were championing, certainly I was, the cannabis tax revenue that we were promised but never received. Certainly local governments in Alberta, Quebec, and Ontario are benefiting, but BC has been left behind. And that was a big part, but it is part of a bigger UBCM project. There's not much we can do locally aside from continuing to make that known. But otherwise that makes sense. Okay.
So just a couple of responses. With VIMQ, there has been some movement, and Sergeant Shaw is going to be in front of council next Monday night talking about the annual performance plan for the RCMP detachment. He is also scheduled for the April committee of the whole meeting to give his quarterly update. So at one of those meetings, he will inform of some of the new discussions that have been going on with VIMQ.
I think just the other piece for council and the public to know is that we also now know what the unionization costs are and how that is impacting, because that's been another piece that's been an unknown cost to us. We knew was coming, but we weren't certain. So I believe our finance director now has that. And we just like the increase in policing with our population is something that's planned for. We knew it was happening. It's just the other pieces are a bit of an unknown to us. So that might help shape those conversations in the future as well.
For sure, yeah. We've the financial planning has been done for the bargaining that the RCMP are not now allowed to do. The additional officer. The only thing that is not budgeted for, as you know, is the 911 response, and we're still waiting to hear whether we're going to have to start paying that in April of 2022, or if there's going to be some relief for that, at least a future years.
Okay, it keeps changing on that file. The other piece with the RCMP is some of them were things, the costs associated with technology for the body worn cameras, the federal government insisted that they have, but local government to pay for all the IT storage of information and the like. DNA testing was also covered federally, and they also wish to push it to local government. So there's still, I think, a few more pieces just to be, that we need to be mindful of, that are still coming our way that are unknown. It's all fine for one level of government to push the cost up, but we also need to know what it is so we can plan for it and determine if it's our bill to pay. Okay, anything else? Go ahead, Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, one more, and that regards the Sooke Lions Center. And can you give me a sense? I know it came to the Land Use and Environment Committee last week, and that meeting didn't happen, but when will we see as a council those new Lions documents?
So we're planning for the public meeting again, now that we can have larger meetings and the COVID rules are relaxed. We met with representatives of the Lions last week. We're trying to pick a date that's going to work for everyone. We know that it's going to be important for council to be able to attend that meeting as well. So you can expect some sort of doodle poll for times for that meeting. So we do want to give a couple of weeks notice before the meeting happens. We're putting together our collateral for that meeting, and we've got concurrence from the Lions on what needs to what we were asked to provide by council was some sort of rendition of what's going there, copy of the lease agreement and the process for the development application. So we've got those ready to go. We just do need to find a date that's going to work for everyone. And that's difficult to do.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you, Mr. McInnes. For now, I would like to invite members of the public who may want to address council on this item. As we are in committee of the whole, public input follows each item individually. So I'd like to invite any members of the public that would like to comment or ask questions only for 5.1, the strategic priorities update. And if you could please come forward to the microphone and turn it on and introduce yourself, that would be great. And then we'll do the same after each particular item, but like to focus it on that one item at a time.
Okay. Mr. Bateman, I'm here to talk regarding the public consultation regarding the Lions proposal.
Just need your name, sorry, sir.
Oh, sorry, Gord William Wallace from Sioux. I'm here to talk about the public consultation process for the Lions proposal. I understand there was a meeting last week that was, there wasn't quorum, and in the strategic plan, it says a meeting to be held to discuss the Lions proposal. I'm just wondering what is proposed in terms of public consultation further than a meeting. The AAP, after it was done, we were told that a number of the public would be extensively consulted regarding any further development on this proposed project. So I'm wondering if anything's been, other than a meeting, has been proposed in terms of communication to the public.
Okay, Mr. McInnes.
The direction that we got from council, your worship, is to have a public meeting. And that certainly will be planned.
I imagine the public meeting, like our other meetings, leads to dialogue, and council can then take that and make determinations following that meeting. Once we have a date for the meeting, we'll be advertising it to the public.
Would there be some financial information provided at that meeting regarding the total project costs? What the involvement of the purchase of the Murray Street property would be entail, and other operational implications regarding the project?
So your worship, the Murray Road property certainly will be part of that discussion. The operations of the facility, there is influence that the district will have through the lease agreement. But it's my understanding that there will be an entity that's formed to operate the facility. all of that will be part of the public meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Do I have any other members of the public on item 5.1? Okay, so I'll look to council then. There is a recommendation here, and that is that the committee of the whole recommend that council approve the strategic priorities chart dated March 28, 2022. Moved by Councillor Logans. Any comments, Councillor Logans? Anything from anyone else? Okay, I'll call the question then. All those in favor, please. That's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Parmar. Congratulations on your excellence awards, by the way. Our next one up is 5.2 OCP discussion topics. Over to staff, please.
Thank you. So as outlined in the staff report, there's 5 topic areas that we generally heard from at the March 7th meeting. That's land use designations, density, floor area ratio, shoreline building setback, and affordability in the OCP. Now, the overall land use plan has not changed dramatically from the 2010 plan to the current draft. The growth boundary established in the Capital Regional District's regional growth strategy also remains the same. What has occurred is further detailing of specific land use designations to correctly identify existing and planned land uses of geographic areas within our community. The community residential designation has not changed notably, other than the reduction in the amount of bare unserviced lands designated CR within the growth boundary. This means the land is not currently in the sewer specified area nor identified in the liquid waste management plan for future sewer expansion. 5 portions of land have been identified in the draft official community plan shown on the screen here with the RU2 and RU4 rural residential zoning, and they are also outside the sewer specified area. There's broad community support for compact growth in the core area of Sooke, which has informed this land use strategy. Therefore, it would be contrary to continue progressing growth to lands that are neither strategic in terms of expansion of servicing, nor within a reasonable distance from existing services, frequent transit and community services. Westwood Trails, which is one of the subject properties, raised their concerns with the OCP Advisory Committee at this time. At the OCP Advisory Committee, and at this time, the draft OCP is written in such a way that removes conflict between land use policy and the land use map. This has been an area of concern in the 2010 OCP, creating conflict between town center objectives and land use designations that promote sprawl. It should be noted that maintaining the 5 portions of land as rural residential does not prevent an applicant from coming forward in future with a redesignation application, in addition to the already required application for inclusion into the sewer specified area and rezoning proposal. The onus is on the applicant to demonstrate policy compliance with the OCP, and at that time, a formal application can be submitted. Quickly want to touch on the employment lands designation as well. As this land use does not exist in the 2010 OCP, we formally acknowledged existing employment lands as well as those previously designated industrial in the 2010 OCP. This is a significant change and strongly supports existing and future expansion of employment creating lands in the district. In the 2010 OCP, technical industrial lands were identified, though they were never designated due to being an overlay and not an official land use designation. Areas such as 17 Mile, which is on the image to your left, that is currently identified as a commercial node overlay in the 2010 OCP is shown here in the draft OCP with an employment lands designation. Question regarding the community residential designation and decreasing from 5 stories to 3 stories was asked, and how this addressed anticipated growth. The map on the left shows the current town center from our 2010 OCP, and the map on the right shows the draft OCP. You'll notice on the right that the town center transitional residential flanks the north and east boundaries of the town center and waterfront area. This is an important designation that supports the town center area through increased densities while protecting the character of community residential neighborhoods. Feedback through engagement was consistent regarding how to develop the town center and this distinction supports that direction. So essentially, what you can see on the right-hand side, there's this built-out area that is addressing that residential component of a higher density that's going to support our town core. That wasn't present in a specified location. It was just within the community residential area. And as you know, in our current 2010 OCP, that spans basically all of our community growth boundary, with the exceptions of across the river where there isn't services. And that we have the gateway residential area and our other rural residential lands. Now, while the overall maximum density has increased from 50 units per hectare to 70 units per hectare, the updated community residential designation contains a mix of smaller single-family, at-grade multifamily in the form of townhouse and stacked housing, and secondary suites that respond to market demands. The use of development permits will be a critical tool to address the look and feel for new residential infill development in existing neighborhoods. Specific to the current town center, this area has been split into two distinct areas, the north being the town center core and south of Sooke Road being the town center waterfront. The extension of the waterfront area on the left of your screen here is a long-range planning opportunity to recognize existing development near the government wharf and support new opportunities to develop and protect the waterfront. While Brownsea Boulevard includes 6 stories, the concept for the waterfront is to transition from 4 stories to 3 stories as you progress west of McGregor Park. The core area north of Sooke Road maintains a similar vision to the 2010 OCP and provides detailed guidance for new buildings to help control the form and character of proposals received by the district. As with the 2010 OCP, this area maintains a 6-story maximum height. On the right, I'll also highlight changes in the gateway designation now being split into a north and south designation by way of the Galloping Goose Trail. The north responds to feedback received about the rural character of the community and preserving 1 hectare or larger lots for residential and agricultural use. The Gateway South area maintains the existing 1/4 hectare size and promotes opportunity for neighborhood scale commercial, recreation, and tourism opportunities consistent with what we've seen with the development of a brewery and bike and surf shop, in addition to existing uses such as a restaurant, grocery store, and gas station. Floor area ratio has been introduced in the draft official community plan to help better manage density and offer design flexibility. The illustration here shows density on a units per hectare basis and approximate scale of development potential as the unit amount increases. The far right is an example of possible development within the town center area, with the far left to middle of the image depicting options within the residential areas outside of the town center. It should be noted that the town center densities are where underground parking makes the most sense based on higher densities, and floor area ratios will help guide unit count and project feasibility. Depending on the floor area ratio of a land use designation, buildings can be designed creatively to maximize density potential while opening up land and airspace. The ratio of a building's total floor area divided by the size of the parcel of land will yield the floor area ratio value. Maximum lot coverage and building heights will guide the shape of a building, skyline, shadowing of a street, and other options, and provide developers with the flexibility to create a town center environment consistent with the vision of the draft official community plan. Now, for context, the core area, as I said, maintains that 6 stories maximum height, and it would have the highest floor area ratio of 2.5. The transitional residential area would be at 4 stories maximum height with a floor area ratio of 2. The waterfront area along Brownsea Boulevard, 6 stories, and then from 4 to 3 stories going west of McGregor Park, also at a ratio of 2. And then the remainder of the community residential area would be at 3 stories and a 1.5 floor area ratio, or 70 units per hectare. So essentially, you've got this big compact area in the center of our community in the core, and then it slowly transitions out as you move further out. And then in the image here, you can see the different trade-offs and design possibilities that could be raised. So in the left corner of the image, that would be an example of using up all of your floor area ratio to build out to the maximum extents of your parcel boundary. And then from there, you move down to the bottom of that image, so the bottom left. That's where there's some variation in the height. So you might have more stories because they haven't used all their stories on the second floor. They've tiered it and then built up to have a third story option. And then in the right image, you can see there's a lot more open space out front, and trying to create more of a public realm to be more inviting and interactive. That there now is playing into having more stories available. So the more stories we allow for and a higher FAR, the more they can build out and kind of create a different streetscape environment rather than just building out to all extents of the property boundaries. And then lastly, with the bottom one right underneath there as well, a same scenario where they're trying to balance all options to maximize the needs of the community. A lot of this will play into our zoning regulations. So as we progress and ultimately adopt the official community plan in some form, that will give us direction through our zoning bylaw review to determine what kind of floor area ratio and maximum site coverage, maximum building heights, all of those regulating factors that will determine what our streetscapes are going to look like with a built form. And that's where we want to still provide a lot of flexibility and creativity to the development community to really meet the guidelines of our official community plan, but then also have a project that's feasible for them, and at the same time provide for those community amenities and ultimate market requests that they'll be hearing in the future for development. Next, shoreline building setback. Throughout the engagement, there's been strong and consistent community support for preserving landscapes and protecting the environment in Sooke, including marine environment and shorelines. There's equally strong desire for increasing public access to the waterfront. Currently, a minimum building setback of 15 meters from the shoreline applies to all properties. And the draft OCP proposes to exceed the 15-meter setback by providing a setback of 30 meters. Increasing the setbacks from the shoreline has a number of benefits over time: improved marine and harbor health and ecological function as buildings are located away from naturalized shoreline areas, improved viewscapes from strategically placed public vantage points, and the ability to include public access in strategic locations along the waterfront that does not threaten the ecological integrity of the foreshore and marine ecosystems. In addition, an increased setback from the shoreline responds to climate risk and makes future waterfront structures in Sooke more resilient to sea level rise and storm surge in low-lying areas. In all instances, council would continue to have the ability to receive a setback variance request, or a landowner could seek a variance from the Board of Variance for undue hardship. And they could rely upon OCP policies and professional reports to help guide the reduction of a shoreline setback on a case-by-case basis. Next, housing affordability is a function of markets and relative incomes, and housing those most in need often requires subsidization. This OCP will not control the market. Sooke's neighborhoods are primarily made up of single-family dwellings, which are the least affordable choice of housing available. Both the current 2010 OCP and draft OCP focus on increasing housing choices throughout the community, including non-market housing, market rate housing, rental housing, suites, supportive housing, seniors housing, accessible housing, and as well as family-friendly housing. We've heard the desire to remain in the community as one ages, and the diversity of options works to provide that opportunity. If we can co-locate people, well-paying jobs and services in the same area, it reduces the need to commute out of Sooke for employment and gives people the choice to walk, bike, and roll to meet their daily needs. For those that continue to commute for work, options will become available to live within walking distance of frequent transit on our core areas. The draft OCP does a better and more balanced job of locating intensive residential in the core areas of Sooke while ensuring that existing neighborhoods absorb growth at appropriate scales, creating an area of transition to support missing middle housing options. And you can see here in the image, that's the portion that's provided in color showing those missing middle options. Traditionally, what you see is on the far left, those single family options, and on the far right, the higher density, low to mid-rise type options. And what we want to secure is more infill options that take advantage of those missing middle options available. Lastly, the current and draft OCP both enable the possibility of considering tax exemptions, DCD DCC reductions and other funding mechanisms to support housing affordability. The district currently has the town center revitalization bylaw in place to help incentivize certain types of development in town center. The zoning bylaw includes provision for density bonusing. There is the potential to revisit and update these tools and also look at additional tools to incentivize the type of development envisioned by the community. We heard strongly from the development community workshops that incentives go a long way in reducing development costs and can allow a developer to include additional items of community benefits, such as more affordability of units and community amenities. The draft OCP does not commit the district to using any particular tool, but rather provides direction to look at all options and do what works best for our community. Affordability is also tied to future economic development initiatives, which will help to locate new and higher paying jobs within Sioux. Another way to support affordability is to focus growth, both population and jobs in a specific location. The official community plan continues to support affordability by focusing on the creation of a town center that includes co-locating housing and people nearby future business locations. The proposed official community plan identifies employment lands for the first time, supporting job creation and local business retention at targeted capacity. Home-based businesses continue to be supported within the draft OCP. Work from home options are not hindered by the current nor draft OCP for jobs that can support remote work. Further economic analysis will be conducted to explore co-working and remote work locations to support residents with a workplace option within the community to reduce commuting out of town. And I could say most recently over the past week, staff have also been exploring that as that's part of the community economic development strategy. So we've also been making contact with local businesses and organizations to explore those options sooner than later. So with that, that concludes my presentation. The recommendation from staff at this time is that the Committee of the Whole receive this report for information and recommend Council direct staff to engage with the community further on the topics presented in this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. A few things, the diagrams you had in here and the mapping is very helpful. So if possible, I would like to receive a printed copy, preferably as large as, like large, not letter size, but maybe 11 by 17, because the diagrams really help a lot with the floor area ratio calculations and as well the mapping. I think part of what's missing for me is I can't see the change. And so when it goes from 50 to 70 FARs, for example, it's just very difficult to visualize that. So it's helpful to know what the current OCP is and then what is proposed. And then you kind of have a before and after and can see it. And then also with the diagram that you had, just showing what the floor area ratio, I think that speaks. Like it says a lot. It's just hard to see on a screen.
Certainly. So would you like those images larger than what's been provided in the report package, or?
I mean, because I don't have your PowerPoint. Oh, I do now. Okay. It just took forever to load. Okay. Printed on like 11 by 17.
Okay.
It's just I don't know, my iPad doesn't talk well with the Wi-Fi in here. So it's just been a struggle to load. So something that like printed and that's otherwise fine when the Wi-Fi works.
We'll prepare those on a larger scale than what's been provided in the staff report.
Okay. The other one that I just have a couple of questions and then I'll go to council. Like what struck me in the staff report is under the last comment somewhere in here, it just speaks to under the strategic relevance heading. There was just a comment about the strategic relevance of the OCP is to develop a regulatory framework. To me, I always felt this was a policy framework and that the zoning is the regulatory legal teeth. So how has that changed? Because zoning, you legally have to have an OCP, a municipality doesn't have to have. So how did this become regulatory? Because I think that says a lot. One is I viewed this as a visioning document, not to have the legislative piece, and that would be hammered out in a zoning bylaw.
Once the municipality does decide to have an OCP, then all of our policy framework does need to align with that OCP. So in that way, there is a policy framework. There are certain things that must be in an OCP, GHG reductions, and a strategy to get to those reductions. Affordable housing, you have to have an affordable housing strategy now. So I think once that council makes the decision to have an OCP, it does have a regulatory piece to it.
Okay, thank you for that. The other piece, in terms of the shoreline, I'm wondering, and maybe this isn't possible, so I'm just going to throw it out there. We talk about the 15 meters and now it's 30 meters and it's to protect the land. Was there any consideration that it could be 15 but higher? Like couldn't height? I mean, or is that, because if the land is flat, it doesn't, if you even had a 50-meter setback, the whole thing would flood all the way and take out the dwelling, like if the land is flat. So I don't even know if this is possible, but it's just when you look at the topography of Sooke, sometimes it's quite hilly and it's quite a steep drop down. So even if there was sea level rises, it's still significantly high. Or is this just not making sense? Like vertical setback.
No, I understand what the question was. I'm just factoring it in, how it would require a little bit more definition to how we would make that determination, because we're combining a steep slopes component with the sea level rise and flood level concerns. So that would need to be molded into a much more elaborated definition for that setback requirement. So that if that's something that council would like to explore, staff would do additional research to see how we could bring forward something that tackles the vertical element that you've raised.
I'm just wondering, because we did have quite a response at our last meeting, and council was going to make a motion that night to make a certain deliberation. So I'm just thinking, if we looked at options on how maybe that could be achieved, like at 15 and in some cases less than, but still protecting.
And sometimes those are the instances when a variance request is brought forward, and why the variance request might be supported is based on some of those vertical characteristics as well, because there wouldn't be a concern through, if a technical report indicated that because there's enough height provided from the setback of the shore, that there wouldn't be a concern to upland impacts of the new development.
Okay, the other piece on that though was my understanding as well, and maybe the committee discussed this, so I would appreciate just if they have, is that through land titles and throughout Sooke, we have several public access points to shorelines, whether it's along the river or along the ocean. And in some cases, we've enhanced these or shifted them. And in other cases, they're known but not known. Was there discussion on, we have these existing public access points and how do we open them up to connect the people to the waters? Like, did that conversation have about getting access to the water and using what is already in place?
So we took a look at the Parks and Trails Master Plan, because that's one of the key documents that focuses on that very topic. And then we melded that with development opportunities. So if there was going to be waterfront development, how could this all integrate together to create one continuous trail? The boardwalk was one example that was discussed amongst the public with waterfront access. So one is key existing locations as identified in the Parks and Trails Master Plan. And then the other component is areas that are being developed, and how does that also factor into granting access? And those are the ones that we're looking at trying to capture and recognize, so that future development does not prevent access. It actually opens up and establishes more continuous access along the waterfront.
Okay, but as far as you know, the Parks and Trails maintains those existing accesses and maybe add some desirable ones. I didn't look at that document, so we're not losing any of the existing ones that we already have.
That would not be the intent. The Parks and
Okay.
Trails Master Plan sets the stage for what was designed through that process, and then this process builds upon that by recognizing The official community plan is looking at the development of private lands, where the Parks and Trails was looking more at that public access component. And we're using all of our master planning documents to speak to each other and ultimately implement this vision.
Okay, I see. And then there is a lot of talk, obviously, about locals getting around Sooke by another option other than a car. So we're doing a lot there. I just wonder, and I don't even know if this is possible, there's a lot of folks commuting into Sooke or coming into Sooke to access services, whether it's medical services, even storage, grocery shopping, you know, like there's so much traffic coming into Sooke every day. It's surprising. It's not just everybody leaving. There's a number of it coming in. So how is that factor in? Like, even if all residents in Sooke chose to walk or ride their bike, there's all the tourists that are coming here. There's folks going further points out west to, you know, go surfing for the day or whatever. And then there's a lot of folks coming in to work here. So how does that get factored into all of this? Even some come here for childcare, family doctors, all of that, right?
So those are components that also play into the community economic development strategy and ultimately down the road, the employment land strategy that we would develop. If we can be at a point where we can have more employment opportunities available, and to that extent also have people come into the community. So we're able to provide housing for those who need it, that want to reside in our community, but we also have ample employment opportunities, then we're going to have additional revenue to tackle a lot of those issues that we face from time to time. As well, this has been discussed with the school district, with the Ministry of Transportation, a number of agencies as well. This will get referred out once it proceeds down the bylaw process, and they will also weigh in. What we know is there's a lot of competing factors from a lot of other municipalities. And so the more that we have going on in our community and the more interest that there is, the more that we can kind of rise up on the ladder to say, hey, we need more supports here. And I think if we have a growing employment base, that will certainly get the notice of a lot of people and more supports. But with our transportation master plan, that's another component that will seek to address a lot of the issues that you just mentioned with traffic.
There's also been some commentary that our connector plans is not fully visible in here, but for those of us sitting around the council table, like we've been so focused on getting that through road connection done, the connection from Phillips over, looking at how it intersects all the way to Otter Point and then coming down to Grand, which I know is highlighted in the transportation master plan, but there was some comments that it's not visible, and how we plan growth along that corridor is obviously important for what will become sort of a secondary bypass route. Can you speak a little bit more about how that is a priority and just how that is influencing the OCP?
Certainly, both the transportation master plan as well as the Parks and Trails master plan are referenced throughout the official community plan draft. And so where there might not be a visual indication through mapping or other illustrations, certainly the text of the document gives direction to those other master planning documents to inform that process. And so that's where we're fortunate to have gone through this process already developing those two master plans, and that's where we relied heavily on just having a reference back to those components and just talking high level within the OCP.
Okay, no, that's fair. And then lastly, it's just in your comments, you had just made that, you know, a group, or maybe not a group, but an applicant could apply for an OCP amendment or even a go to the Board of Variance or zoning variance. That's a really tough place, though. It's a tough place for council to sit and also a tough place for the applicant, because then it comes in, you know, I've been in that seat, not on a Board of Variance seat and certainly not as an applicant, but as a counselor for many years, like it's tough when something is, now you're amending the OCP and you see the intent, but then that carries, it's not an easy, difficult, or not an easy, difficult. It's a very difficult decision. And for me, I just struggle. If someone had something, either a property right to do something under the OCP as it exists now, or a resident that they own that is then burnt, like that's a tough place to put somebody to then come forward and plead hardship in a public meeting and ask for that. And if all of councils knew to start amending the OCP that we just adopted doesn't address it either. So I just feel that's a tough expectation to put on anybody. That's more of a comment. I don't really expect an answer back, but when you said it, I'm like, I don't feel that's an easy place to place anybody, not council, certainly not staff, because then you're saying you can do this and vote against the OCP, and then people will say, oh, you're setting precedent and da, 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 da. And then council doesn't want to make a decision. So we send it to the Board of Variance and we go back and forth for a long time. And then ultimately a council comes in and says, just do this and change everything. It upsets the apple cart. So it's just not a good place to start. Mr. McInnes, were you gonna answer that?
Yeah,
And
just
then
one
I'll-
response to one of your questions, Your Worship. The flood construction levels are the vertical setbacks. Bylaw 773, which was adopted, I believe, in September of 2020, does have flood construction levels for identified flood zones, our flood plains in Sioux.
Okay, Councillor Beddoes.
Yeah, this is the question stage. Is that correct? It's not comments or anything about these things.
Yeah, I just
Okay.
had
No,
questions. Yeah.
I'm not worried about what you said, just what I'm going to say. So, no, I just, thank you very much for the brief. It has helped me greatly because involved with the OCP, there's some things that I was very confused on. One is your shoreline building setbacks. The main thrust of those setbacks, according to your brief and from what I've heard in the community, were not so much the flood levels, which can be addressed in other areas, but it was the foreshore for the environment. That was the main thrust behind that. So I just wanted to make that clear. We don't get into global warming and rising tides. So I just wanted to make that point. That is correct. That's the main thrust of your report here, correct?
That is the main component. The other component is being proactive and planning also for sea level rise and all the other things that are being researched right now and communicated down from the province.
Okay, on another matter, and that is the West Hills area. We're talking about, changing. Sorry? West Ridge, sorry. It's Ridge, sorry. Yeah, we're West Hills. Sorry, I didn't want to talk about Langford. Let me get that. But anyways, the short and long of it is by taking that designation out, you add one more step to their procedure if they wanted to develop that land further. And I guess with me, if you take one more step, that's adding one more level of risk. Each one of those steps, as the mayor alluded to, you don't know if the next council is going to approve an OCP change, never mind a sewer specified area change, and then the zoning. So with the proposal of taking that CR designation out, we've added one more step for the West Ridge development that wasn't there before and could possibly cause them some hardship. That's a correct statement?
Correct. It adds one more step. It's a step that in the drafting of this document would be required to ensure that the plan for developing the town center would have more success than it currently has. And that is why we identified the differences between the 2010 OCP versus the draft. And that's not just the West Ridge property, but also the 4 other ones. So 5 large land segments in total that currently, to our knowledge, does not have any servicing or any development on those properties.
Okay, thank you. That's, I wanted to get that clarification that it does add a step. And then, of course, a little comment that a step adds risk. The last one that I'm still confused on is at the last meeting, we had a number of people from the Whiff and Spit area were concerned about us changing their densities. And I'm struggling with how we did that, because being involved in the OCP, I don't recall us ever having any discussions about changing the density in Whiff and Spit. Is it getting confused with this 50 units per hectare as 7 versus 70 for the downtown core? That doesn't apply to the Whiff and Spit area though, does it? Or can you explain that to me a bit better? I'm just having a hard time understanding that.
So as it stands right now in the 2010 official community plan, the designation for Whiff and Spit is community residential. That designation remains the same in the draft OCP. The difference is the community residential area as a whole across the community has increased from 50 units per hectare to 70 units per hectare. So that's perhaps where the density comment has changed. In terms of a land use designation, it's always remained that same land use designation of community residential.
So if I'm just trying to understand this, that it's being skewed because of our changing the downtown densities, sort of skews the whole picture. Because there's a reason why they're upset out there. And I want to, make it clear that it wasn't the intention of the OCP to, increase their densities down there. I mean, they have to deal with the sewer, but that's another issue. I'm not dealing with that. So their zoning is still their zoning and it hasn't changed. So I don't see how there is a density change there.
The intent was not to change the Whiff and Spit area density specifically. What changed was the community residential density from 50 units per hectare to 70 units per hectare. Whiff and Spit, because it falls within the community residential area, would be subject to that 70 units per hectare difference than what the entire community residential area in our 2010 OCP has. So as it stands right now, 2010 OCP, 50 units per hectare in the community residential area, which Whiff and Spit is a part of. Whiff and Spit in the draft OCP continues to be part of the community residential area. What has happened across the community in the draft OCP is that community residential area has increased from 50 units per hectare to 70 units per hectare.
So it has increased there. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
And across the entire community residential area.
So all community residential areas have increased
Correct.
from 50 to 70.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, any other
And that's
questions?
that's the maximum density potential. And
I have lots of comments, but that will come, at a later date when we hear from the public again. And I have a number of things, but I appreciate you clearing that up for me. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bateman?
Okay, first of all, thank you through you to staff for organizing this into these 8 discussion topics, which I trust will be renewed and emphasized during our open house, whenever that will be next month at a larger venue, hopefully on a Saturday, where we can all get out and have this conversation. As a Whiff and Spit resident, I'll just pick up on where Councillor Beddoes left off. I did take a photo of a flyer that was posted to a post box. And it states the maximum density 1.5 FAR, 70 units per hectare. And the fear here is that means these numbers could apply to every property in the neighborhood and can allow for significantly increased density throughout the neighborhood. So to be very clear, the zoning bylaw and its very specific locations throughout the community is where we might possibly see the density of that kind.
so the official community plan will set the land use designations and maximum height as we have in our land use table, the densities, so 70 units per hectare. And as you were just saying, the zoning of those properties will then further indicate what maximum densities they could reach. Some instances, there might be zoning that might only allow for 30 units per hectare, some that might be up to 50 units per hectare. It's all based on those development proposals that would come forward at a future date for that.
So to ask you to be a mind or a fortune teller, do you anticipate our next zoning bylaw to be radically different from what we currently have?
I think that's a tough question.
That all depends
Yeah,
on
give it a go.
the official community plan that ends up being adopted. That will certainly give guidance to what our zoning bylaw will look like following the adoption. So not.
And yet you have received a lot of public input on the kind of community that they'd like to see. So I would imagine the zoning bylaw might be consistent to a very large degree with what we currently have.
I would say when it comes to respect to the town center area, that's where most of the input that we heard about housing and densities really received the most feedback on. For the rest of our community residential areas, it seemed to be more of like a status quo understanding with some infill opportunities where the zoning would be supported.
Okay. Why the jump from 50 to 70?
The jump from 50 to 70 was in relation to what makes the most sense for trying to provide more housing throughout our community and what could be accomplished on these land-based areas. So that's really the reason for providing that increase. It's just kind of recognizing what was relevant in 2010. Could you kind of use an enhancement now with this draft that we're proposing and reaching our anticipated growth targets as well and managing that growth.
Okay, so let's, I'll go to item 1 here, land use designations. And you're stating 5 large parcels have been removed from community residential. That includes Farrell Estates Phase 3, Aaron Estates, possibly future phases out towards Kemp Lake, and the Sun River section along Phillips, which is contiguous with the current Sun River development. I wish we had these, you know, how do I access that map you have? Back one more. There we are. So could you identify Farrell Estates Phase 3? Is that just one of those 2 yellow blocks, or is it both those yellow blocks?
It would be the furthest right block.
Furthest right,
Okay.
okay.
The yellow.
Is it true that there is no other development planned for these other blocks of undeveloped land at this point?
I haven't been made of any development proposals for the other land stuff.
Okay. So Farrell Estates is a case apart to these other blocks of land.
They made representation before the official community plan advisory committee regarding their development interests. Yes.
Okay. And in terms of this extra step that Councillor Beddoes alluded to in getting an OCP amendment, that process, as I understand it, would involve a basic base fee plus a 15 cents per square meter charge to the applicant?
It would be at the time of their application, it would be whatever the fees and charges bylaw indicates for
Right.
development applications.
So currently that'd be about $60,000 on top of other costs. Okay. Once the DCCs have paid for new roads and sewer infrastructure, then those roads and sewers become the responsibility of the district to maintain and upkeep.
Where municipal infrastructure has been installed to service new development, that will ultimately become part of the assets maintained and operated by the district.
Right. Okay. Sorry, these are very basic questions, Mr. Palo, that let's see. I noticed the village character you've identified in the OCP. I think the one spot where we do identify 4 very particular spots, Murray Road, Goodmere between Murray and Brownsea, Brownsea Boulevard itself, and the corner at Maple and West Coast Road. These are the potential spots where we could see 70 units per hectare in the community, town center and community residential.
Sorry, just to recap, you had referenced the Brownsea Road, Brownsea Boulevard section. So in those areas, that's where a floor area ratio has been specified. So that would be dependent on when a developer puts forward a proposal, how many units they might be able to envision for that property. It's only in the community residential areas where the units per hectare calculation in the 1.5 FAR come into play.
So that corner at Maple and West Coast Road is potentially that spot.
I believe so. My map is just. Yeah, where the designation indicates community residential, then yes. For the areas lying within the waterfront area, they'd be subject to the 2.0 FAR.
Right, okay. Now, one of the part of the feedback we've received is that there's quite possibly this OCP allows a corridor of commercial development from the Prestige all the way to Kaltassin. Now, looking at the current zoning map, I see that that is not the case, that there are some commercial node at Maple, and we have the castle, town center definitely, but the castle, and I don't think there's further commercial till you get to Fuka Cycle along that corridor. So we can set that individual's mind to rest that we won't have a strip, a commercial strip along the West Coast Road.
You're talking about the when you mentioned the Fuka Cycle, the surf shop out in the east side of the community in the Gateway residential area. Yeah, so there's a number of different land use designations that are all along that strip, and so the uses are dependent if they fall within the boundaries of those varying land uses. Within the Gateway area, we're talking about more neighborhood scale commercial tourism recreation opportunities, and that's capturing on the shore side opportunities that present themselves. But many of those properties would have to go through a rezoning process, and again, that's a public process.
Well, I'll pause at this point and perhaps pick up later.
Thank you, Councillor Bateman. Councillor Logans or Lajeunesse, any questions? Go ahead.
All the good questions have been taken. Thanks, councillors. But building off what Councillor Bateman was discussing, I have a question through you to Mr. Paolo about the moving from 50 units to 70 units. With the knowledge of our anticipated growth, what is the impact to our community if we maintain the 50 units as opposed to moving to something like 70 units?
So moving to the 70 units provides for a little bit more housing flexibility. Obviously, the lower units per hectare number that we have, the lower end housing variation we can have available. It lends itself to a low density residential style development. Whereas if we move up in the amount of units that we can have, we might have stacked row housing and the more duplexes and cluster type housing available. And I believe in the land use table for our different land uses, we've identified that the community residential area is a low to medium density type of land use, whereas the Gateway residential is geared specifically to low density. So the more units per hectare provides for the development community to have more flexibility in what their proposals look like. And ideally, we want to encourage more units, but at the same time, still have a lot of amenity space available.
Thank you. And it sounds like in that case, it sort of helps us reach our affordable housing and growth targets as well.
Correct. The more units that we can offer will address a lot of the housing needs, and as well for a developer determine how feasible their projects can be, with considering if there's DCCs, other amenity contributions that are required. We want to offer as much flexibility as we can, while at the same time maintaining the integrity of the community vision through this document.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Lajeunesse, any questions?
Just a couple regarding Feral Estates. Did staff require them to supersize their wastewater treatment facilities based on the community residential use of that phase 3 that they're planning, and also the road width that they put in, which is probably built to a higher standard than any other road in the district? and it's a road to nowhere if they're not allowed to proceed with the community residential.
So I know in the past, it's been referenced by Feral Estates about those previous comments from staff, and I would certainly welcome further discussion with them regarding the correspondence regarding that. I've looked through the files as well as staff, and we're still looking for that correspondence. So I would welcome more ongoing conversation regarding those comments that they've made in past correspondence regarding oversizing and future planning for that area.
Okay, thank you. This is an odd one, but it was an article that I read earlier today. I was just trying to find it, and it's a problem that's happening in the city of Toronto. May not come to pass here, where folks are actually going below. They have a height restriction above, so they're actually going below and going, in some cases, a few stories underneath their houses to put in movie, for movies, their own driving ranges, bowling, whatever a resident wants, and actually going under their home and completely underneath their backyard. And it's starting to cause problems, obviously, because of the drilling. So in some cases, like several stories down. Now, I know we have a lot of rock here. It may not even be an issue. I was trying to read something different than the regular news of what's occurring on the Ukraine, and then this article came to me. And I don't even know if that's going to be a problem, but given that it is happening, I've heard of it occurring in Whistler with illegal suites and garages and basements and under basements and under crawl spaces. Because of shortages. Town of Banff has had similar ingenuity occurring. And as well, Toronto, there was, I think some actor and the flooding in his basement sort of led to this actually known, and there's a picture of it. So I guess if you have time and money and creativity, who knows what will happen. But just given the expensive housing and so forth, not an issue we need to worry about. I mean, and people put it in panic rooms, all sorts of things. Like, it was quite interesting headline out of Toronto today.
That's the first that I've heard of that, so I don't have an immediate zoning response, but certainly for my own curiosity, I'll just raise this with the chief building official tomorrow to see if he's heard of any discussions amongst other local governments of this housing scenario being considered and what implications it might have from a building code standpoint, and housing people below ground at I don't know how many stories, but those challenges and how that impacts on that code compliance piece as well.
It actually started with city officials realizing that trees were actually disappearing overnight, and it's because they were going through the ground because of the root structure. And again, there's so much other news in the world that sometimes these come up. So I'll find it, but it is becoming a problem in Toronto because of the demands of housing and the ability to build luxurious swimming pools, even underground, several stories down. So I'll find it. I wanted to find it and just tell you where it was. It wasn't fake news. It had, counselors I know quoted. So just saying. I'll reach out to you. I'll send it to you. Of course.
Yeah, this is going back to follow the 50 to 70 units. Is there a possibility that we could have CR1 and CR2 zones, or the CR1 50 to 70 units per hectare and CR2 community residential 2 in the outlying areas, which would stay with the 50? Just a question.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. That might be something that would be for consideration as part of the open house piece.
Okay.
Because we have varying land use splits, like the gateway area and the town center area. So if that's something to address, kind of maintaining status quo from the 2010 document for specifically the Whiff and Spit area.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
That could be a consideration.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, seeing that, oh, question, then I'll go to the public.
I'll just jump in with the shoreline setbacks. Okay. So I read part of the Green Shores report yesterday, and of course, we're not alone. There are dozens of communities with oceanfront. Campbell River has a 30-meter setback. Gibson's has a 30-meter. Lanceville has 15. City of Powell River is 15, and on we go. In developing this, did you utilize the Green Shores guidelines to set your 30-meter setback?
Yes, we used a number of sources, including that one, and just looking at best practices. There's a lot of discussion going towards using the 30 meters and planning for the future and maintaining those shoreline areas in a natural state. So that was where, in terms of best practices, we were leaning towards going with that as opposed to the status quo of the 15 meters.
Okay. This applies strictly to new development on the shoreline. Does this mean that the 300 current property owners with shoreline access and homes, are they grandfathered into some sort of, yeah?
So when there's a change to the regulations of an existing development and they no longer are able to comply with what's been written, they receive a legal non-conforming status. So under that, they can continue to exist under their previous regulations. And then at a future time, if they were to propose new development on the property, the requirement would be that new development comply with whatever the regulations of the day are.
So in the case that Director Hicks brought to us of a fire that would destroy his home, is that an example of that hardship case that would need to go to a board of variance?
If a property was destroyed and somebody wanted to rebuild it in its entirety back in that same location, and that location could not comply with the current regulations of the day, then they may indicate that as a hardship to seek variance.
Oh, I've got more. Wait. I'm blanking.
Can we pause, Councillor Bateman? There has been a request for a health break. Councillors do have to travel a few flights, so if the public could just bear with us, and then 7 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. And then we'll come back and then turn the mic to the public, and then that'll give you time if you have a follow-up question. Okay? Okay, so take 5, everyone. Are members of the, sorry folks, are members of the public looking to access a washroom? Washroom facility, anyone? Mr. McInnes will take you to the closest one. Okay, folks. Okay, everyone, thank you. If we could get everyone back into their seats. We'll resume the meeting. Okay, thank you, everyone, for moving so quickly. So back in session. And as noted, we'll turn over to members of the public. So if anyone would like to give some comments, if you could please come forward, please turn on the microphone and just give us your name by way of introduction. And we'd like to hear from you on this particular item. So OCP discussion topics.
Thank you, Your Worship. My name is Andy Hayden. I'm from Sooke. I'm from the Whiff and Spit neighborhood. I hadn't planned to come up first, but given some of the discussion and some of the questions that have been raised, I think I decided to come up and strike while the iron is hot. But I would like to thank Council for this opportunity to speak to you again tonight about the OCP, and also to thank district staff for their report prepared for tonight's meeting and the information that's contained in that report, which I found helpful. I was here 2 weeks ago. No, so I'm moving on, and that did help. I do want to speak tonight to the same thing I spoke to 2 weeks ago, which was density. And I do understand the importance of density in the overall thrust of the OCP. The phrases that are in there, like prohibit urban sprawl and compact growth strategy and focused residential growth, they all reflect that. And density is key to all of them, all of those aspirations, and I do support them in principle. It's the applications of the principles at the micro level, and specifically in the Whiff and Spit neighborhood that I live in, that I'm still struggling with. I've read the report that was prepared by staff, and in particular read the section on density and the community residential designation. And I'm accepting what's there at face value. And I've also read it in the stated context, that it's a comparison of the CR designation in the existing OCP, CR designation in the draft OCP. We've already heard that discussed. I've got three issues. The first is the statement that the CR land use designation remains largely unchanged. That's followed by the overall maximum density, as we've heard, increased from 50 units per hectare to 70. That's a 40% increase between OCPs. I have difficulty accepting that as largely unchanged. That's my first issue. Second, I'm going to preface this. I hadn't planned to say this, but I'm going to preface it by saying I'm certainly not infallible and I stand to be corrected if I'm wrong. I've been through the existing OCP and I've done it on a page-by-page basis, looking for a reference in there to 50 units per hectare and the CR designation. I can't find it. I can find on page 74 of the existing OCP a reference to base density of 10 dwelling units per hectare for the CR designation. But there's a big difference between base and maximum, so that's an apples and oranges comparison. But I'm still at a loss to know where that 50 units came from and then what that rationale is for the increase from 50 to 70. The third issue I've got is that the staff report is referring to residential infill, variety of housing types fitting respectfully into existing neighborhoods, gentle density. Again, in principle, no problems with them. But the sentence that follows in the staff report says what this means, and again, this is specific to Whiff and Spit. What this means is there continues to be support for secondary suites in all areas, and the next part's underlined, where there is access to sewer. Duplexes, smaller lot residential, as well as townhouses are supported. So given this, in the Whiff and Spit neighborhood, I'm assuming that without sewer, the broader range of housing types can't be supported. I'm also assuming that the maximum density objective of 70 units per hectare in the CR designation that's in the draft OCP is needed to support that broader range of housing types. So finally, I'm assuming that if sewer expansion in the Whiff and Spit neighborhood does not receive sufficient support, that maximum density objective of 70 units per hectare for the Whiff and Spit neighborhood, as it's currently proposed in the draft OCP, that would be moot, can't be achieved. So if my analysis is correct, my suggestion to council would be that for clarity, they maybe consider a statement in that CR designation of the draft OCP that those objectives and policies may not apply in the Whiff-and-Spit neighborhood and until it's known whether the Whiff-and-Spit sewer system is going to proceed or not. And I think that is also germane, given the comment that's been made this evening, is that we could be waiting for a year or more to know what the outcome of those grant applications are, which is going to be obviously crucial as to whether Whiff-and-Spit goes or Kaltassin goes, both go, none go, whatever the case may be. So then, as it's currently written, the CR designation is in response to feedback from residents who've expressed concern with drastic character changes happening in the neighborhoods or at the expense of increased density. So if any Whiff-and-Spit residents takes that 70 units per hectare size of their lot coverage standard under the zoning bylaw, they can presumably work out what that would mean for their property. They can decide for themselves how they feel about the density objectives in the draft LCP. And the question is, how many people are going to have the capacity or the willingness to do that? And I'll also add what I said when I was here last time, and that is that even though I recognize it's a maximum density, doesn't mean that's going to be achieved on all lots in Whiff-and-Spit or any of the other areas that are going to be CR designation. But it is a number that's going to grab people's attention. And will they be able to understand it correctly or not, to me, is still going to be key. And so 2 weeks ago, I said I hadn't taken a position on the maximum densities that are proposed. And that still holds because I'm still at the point where I'm trying to understand. I'm a bit closer to understanding as it affects my property and the neighborhood, but I'm not all the way there yet. And 2 weeks ago, I said, I believe the public still needs to know more about maximum density objectives. I'd like to expand on that tonight and to simply say that given everything else that's in your draft OCP and some of the issues that have been talked about here tonight, town center and so forth, Sooke needs to know more and about know and understand more about density, period, as it's applying across the district under the draft OCP and not just in Whiff-and-Spit. How density would work under this draft OCP, what it would mean to people's property, their neighbors' properties, their neighborhoods that they live in, and what the density policies in the draft OCP could mean to Sooke in terms of built form and visual impact over the long term. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hayden. Are there speakers this evening? I'm going to ask our deputy corporate officer what, I should know this and I don't, time limit on speakers. We usually tend to be more flexible in committee of the whole, so I kind of didn't even follow it.
There is a provision in the procedure bylaw for 5 minutes per speaker during committee of the whole, but council can waive it by majority resolution.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, members of the committee and Madam Chair, staff. As with the other speakers, I want to thank.
Could you just introduce yourself, please, with your name?
I beg your pardon. Gerard LeBlanc. I'm here representing Farrell Estates. I'm a member of their project team, and I'm speaking on behalf of Ross McPhail, who wasn't able to make it to the meeting this evening. Thank you for that reminder. I want to thank everybody, staff and council, committee of the whole, for the opportunity to open up a discussion on many of the issues that have been associated with the OCP over the past year and a half or so, maybe longer. This report initiates a much needed discussion, so we're happy to hopefully contribute to it. A number of the committee members have raised points above Farrell, and many which are in my presentation, which I really don't need to cover in very much detail. However, there are some very important points that require consideration. And one of those is that the property, the 100 acres, is adjacent to contiguous development on 3 sides: Sellers Road, Burr, Blanchard, and Mount View Heights. It also has 3 areas where sewer and water enable the property to be serviced. Development of the property can't proceed without inclusion in the sewer service area, nor without a rezoning. We recognize that. That's under the current zoning or under the current designation. Going to rural designation adds another significant step in terms of requiring an OCP amendment. I believe the cost for the zoning amendment we submitted in 2017, 2018, thereabouts was $70,000. You can probably add another $60,000 to that for an OCP amendment. These are ballpark figures. I'm just pulling them out of the air, okay? But they're not totally inaccurate. Going this direction comes at a really bad time when we're going through a housing crisis. It's going through a tough time when Sooke has a shortage of housing, as well as the rest of the province. We need to understand that Farrell has gone a long way based on, and Mr. Powell referred to this, based on some requests that were made of the company by staff, the upgrade to the Mountain View Heights pump station in order to service the 100-acre developments, as well as the construction of Ridgecrest Road, because Burr Blanchard couldn't, the configuration that had been put in place couldn't accommodate the volume and the traffic load that would have come from the development of the 100 acres. And that road is developed to a very high standard. It has the widest multi-use trail sidewalk in all of Sooke. It's been designed for cyclists, for pedestrians, for boarders, for kids on scooters, pedestrians, and it's intended to connect with the planned Otter Point multi-use pathway into the town center that's proposed by the district. It's also a feature within the development to provide connectivity to the rest of the community. In its entirety, the development is not is less than 2 kilometers away from the town center. It's closer than either Sun River or Aranan to Sea Park and the playing fields at Fred Milne. I'm sorry, it's closer to the town center than Aranan and Sun River, and it's closer to Fred Milne Park, EMCS, and Sea Park than Aranan is. So it's all possibly within walkable distance. We're wanting the existing designation to be retained. We know that what we have to go through with the inclusion into the SSA and a rezoning. And we want to move forward with phase 3. We want to go forward with that discussion with council and with staff. And hopefully we can make that happen. It's very important. And Farrell will be considering what comes out of this meeting and subsequent steps. I see I'm running out of time here. I just want to make two short points. One, I noted that a reference was made to one open house. It may not be sufficient in terms of some of the interests that the community has. We may have to have more than one. Second point is the recommendation asks for consideration of the open house for the points discussed in the report. There are other issues that may arise in the open house, which the community wants discussed. And I don't think those should be eliminated simply because they're not in the report. Thank you.
Point. Thank you, Mr. LeBlanc.
Brian Butler, Ella Road. Your worship, councillors. I wasn't going to speak, but something that George said just reminded me of something. Last time we were here 2 weeks ago, we had 5 minutes, of course, to speak, and there's not enough time at all to bring up all the issues brought forth by this new OCP in 5 minutes. So that while I really do appreciate the staff's attempts to answer the issues, they're not all there because we weren't able to raise the ball. So it's great to have some real dialogue going on. We appreciate that. But when you have an open house, and I think 2 would be nice, but we must be free to bring up all the issues and discuss them at length in detail with staff and with councillors. Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Butler.
Thank you, Council, Madam Mayor. My name is Philip Buchanan. I'm on the project team for Farrell Estates, and we've been developing West Ridge Trails for a few years now, and I believe it's a successful, attractive development that residents of Sioux appreciate. And along with the development, there's been ample park space, protection of the environment, and a lot of good amenities for the district of Sioux. I believe, and I hope I'm not mistaken, correct me if I am. Well, first of all, I believe Farrell Estates, myself personally, I support town center development. I think it's a great concept. It's a great thing. It's important for the community. And a healthy, vibrant downtown's great. And I think the more people on the edge of town that can walk to town, ride a bike to town, spend their money in town, supports the businesses and helps employment. I heard a partner of mine once said, you know, a lot of communities, they all after the $100, get the $100. Well, I think sometimes you got to get the $10. You know, if you can get a little something from all these people at West Ridge Trails, future development, spend some money downtown, it all helps. It sure doesn't hurt. So I believe Farrell Estates support the downtown. I think, I hope I didn't hear this, but I believe I heard that developing West Ridge Trails Phase 3 puts development of the town center at risk. That's why I'm here speaking right now. I don't see the connection, and it's an unfortunate comparison. There was one member of the OCP Advisory Committee that told me that perhaps the OCP can provide something for everyone, a bit of something for everyone. I don't believe we need to eliminate West Ridge Trails in order to have the town center development. The people of Sioux, they need housing. We need housing for people. Why do we need to limit one form of housing? I just don't understand that. So that's my comment tonight, and I hope that can be discussed as to why development of West Ridge Trails, a nice development with trails and parks, environmental protection, puts the downtown center at risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buchanan.
Herb Haldane, 3118 Otter Point Road. I think that one of the things key to remember here is that this whole official community plan belongs to Sioux people and belongs to this council. It doesn't belong to staff at all. So staff's just going to facilitate whatever Sioux people and whatever you guys bring to the table and decide what's right or wrong for the community and what works for the community. Staff will come and go, and they do over time, and they'll start up something in another community and so on. But most of you guys will be here forever. The Sioux people that are moving here have expectations of a decent plan, and the people that are living here right now definitely have expectations of a decent plan. What Phil was just talking about, here you have a raw piece of land of 100 acres. You're not infringing on anybody. If you go down Whiff and Spit, you have a whole bunch of single family homes that are going to have phone calls to you guys about building townhouses next door and 3-story buildings. And that's the problem that's going to run down Whiff and Spit when you put sewers down there, because everybody who expects to retire on their little piece of paradise in their property, and because there's small pieces of property there, you're going to be building townhouses next door to this guy and this guy all the way down the line. If you build up in Farrell Estates, you got 100 acres of raw land with some trails running through it that'll probably be donated to the District of Sioux and the Parks Department, so people can still access up to the top of Broom Hill. And then at the same time, you'll have a variety of housing. It can be townhouses, it can be single family homes, but it's on a raw piece of land that doesn't impose itself on anybody for 100 acres. So I think that's been overlooked in this plan. I think the other thing with the waterfront that's being overlooked is the fact that you've got people who have lots on the waterfront that probably aren't much more than 30 meters from the high water mark. So if you're going to impose some 30-meter setback all along across from Buffy's Pub, right up all the way through Sioux, those are all small pieces of property. 15 meters prohibits them from building something decent on there now, let alone 30 meters. And the thing about it being anything to do with environmental, the environmental federally, and even the province talking about it in the best practices guides for fresh water, talks about it being from the high water mark to the low water mark. It has nothing to do with the actual usable land up top. And I think what Mayor Tate was trying to explain with the whole idea of the floodplain idea is that floodplain setbacks take care of everything. 1.5 meters higher than the high water mark, all the way back to wherever. But the point is, in most municipalities, you can still build in a floodplain. If you go out to Gordon's Beach, they're building houses along Gordon's Beach all the time, and it's all in the floodplain. But what they do is they say you have to be 1.5 meters higher with your foundation than the highest tide or the highest flood they've ever had. So people build foundations that are way up off the ground. They bring in a bunch of fill, and so you go. And that's all we would have to do in the district of Sooke as well. You also have a whole bunch of people in Sooke who want to access water, and you were talking about coming up with accesses. The Land Title Act says every 200 meters in any municipal or any town, anytime somebody subdivides, you have to take access to the water every 200 meters. Outside the town core, it's every 400 meters. So there's a whole bunch of ability that's already given to you from the provincial government to be able to access to water. But what's happened in Sooke over the last bunch of years, and believe me, I brought it up when I was on council as well, and it didn't happen. We weren't taking these accesses to the water, or we would take a 3-meter trail. The Land Title Act says 20 meters. And sometimes they'll allow you to split 10 meters with one property owner and 10 with the other, depending on who does it and at what time. But a 3-meter trail to the water, that's not significant enough. You want to be able to drive down there someday, you know, or launch a boat. Maybe we'll put another boat launch in somewhere else. That's the whole idea behind a 20-meter one. So what we want to do here is we want to have a plan that's basically has everybody in mind. I don't think this has been talked about enough. It's already proven tonight, just from this little conversation, that there's a whole bunch of town people that are going to start coming up more and more and more. And when you talk to when somebody sitting on the committee is telling you that they don't think that this is a good plan based on his one interpretation, then you know that it's going to happen as more coffee room talks happen, more people start conversing with each other. You're going to hear more about waterfront. You're going to hear more about Whiff and Spit. You're going to hear more about where they think growth should and shouldn't happen. And that's the problem we've run into with COVID being the last couple of years. All this dialogue's gone behind closed doors over the last couple of years. There has been some online stuff, but believe me, there's a lot of computer illiterate people or people who just don't bother going on the computers to do all their business. So I think you're going to find there's going to be a lot more people wanting to talk about it. And there's going to be some landowners who are going to be more interested now that they're hearing about where this is headed. But I'm hoping that it stays with the public and with council and it doesn't turn into a staff document. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haldane.
William Wallace from Sooke again. I'm confused. There's 2 years in the development of a draft OCP. Numerous drafts have been available to the public. There's an OCP advisory committee that has met every single month for the last while and have contributed to the development of the OCP. We have a staff that have put in numerous of hours liaisoning with the committee and with dialogue in the development of this document. At the last minute, when we go to have a first reading, there seems to be a backlash in on the document. I just can't see why at the last minute it's come to a head. The document has many failings, but it is a document that the community has had access to. It has reference to the most important element that our community and the world faces right now, which is climate emergency. Last week, 3 days, the Antarctic experienced temperatures over 7 degrees over normal. It's unbelievable what's happening to the world out there. Sooke is in a very lucky position to be in the environment that we are in. We don't feel the effects as much as the rest of the world in the global south. We have to start doing our part. And the OCP that's been drafted gives us a direction to both have a sustainable, safe, and socially responsible community. And we need to adopt it. Enough talk, and let's get on with the job of a sustainable community and our climate responsibilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace.
Ellen Lures. thank you for those comments. I was served on the committee and I don't feel like I was a part of the consultation either. There's things that came up in there that were not, like the 30 meter, 15 meter. We talked about it. None of us agreed with that 30 meter, and yet there it is in there. There's the community residential on the west side to have from Galloping Goose to the ocean, to have that all what is it called? Increased I forget what it was called. So what did you say, Matthew? It was oh gosh. It's some kind of a tourist destination,
The
whatever.
Employment lands.
Pardon
Is that
me?
right? Employment lands?
No.
No,
It was
okay.
tourist. It was a tourist lands. So that would mean more traffic coming off in that area in there. And it's already a high accident rate in that area. It wasn't discussed with the committee. It just came up. All of a sudden there it was. And well, where'd that come from? It made no sense. Because it increases traffic and also becomes like a strip mall all along there. And our last OCP, we said we didn't want to have that strip mall thing going through Sooke. We don't want to call it strip mall. We're unique. We don't want to have that. So I don't know how those things appeared. So I agree with all the previous speakers, most of them, because there was a lot of things that are happening here that we really didn't have any discussions with, and it wasn't proper consultation with the public. The public did not have the opportunity to speak and discuss. I've had many people come and talk to me, but it still isn't all of the people. And I think we need to go back to the drawing board. And unfortunately, it didn't. We talked about it, that maybe we should cancel this and put it later. As our committee, we talked about that, and I think we should have done that because we don't have proper consultation. And as far as the setbacks from the water and environmental and all that sort of thing, the district has water test results that I did ask our CAO about that. I still haven't heard back, but where's the test results for the water on the ocean and on the rivers? Because we get them every year. As you know, you get reports every year, and they didn't happen this year. And I couldn't find them on your website either. So if we're saying that there's environmental concerns, well, let's see them. What are the concerns that we want to have 30 meter setbacks? What we do need is a bypass. We need a bypass for Sooke Road. I live on that road and I've lived there for 35 years, and what I've seen is disgusting. You see people backed up like that. If that isn't an environmental concern, it should be. We need to have a bypass. You can't build on a highway. You can't build a town around a highway. It just doesn't work. The highway has to be moved elsewhere, and then we can build a town. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lourdes. I think it's the CRD that does the testing, so we can follow up with that.
Committee, mayor, staff. I've been through these.
And you are, sir?
Oh, I beg your pardon. I forgot myself. My name is Adrian Cowden. I live on Steeplechase. I'm a developer, contractor. And as my son said one day, as I was sniveling about the traffic on Sooke Road, Dad, how much of that are you responsible for? So the fact is that we have developed a community in the last 15 or 20 years that's most desirous. We've created a mecca. People want to be here. It's not like 20 or 30 years ago when people would turn up their nose and say, you live in Sooke? Well, yeah, I do, and I still do. So there are issues that we have to address. One of them, we talk about traffic. we have a traffic issue. We know that. And Mayor, you yourself said, and I've lived this, you waited an hour and a half to get from Langford to the 4-lane to your home. Well, I similarly found myself in that traffic jam recently. And I had to wonder why. Why are all these cars coming into Sooke between 3 and 6 in the afternoon? I start my day early. The simple answer is those are the cars that are taking people into town at 4:30, 5:30, 6:30, including my vehicles, where we have to go to find work. Simply because we need more development in this community. We need more single family development. It's great to say that we need density in the town core, and I agree with that 100%. We 10 years ago went through this agonizing process of planning the downtown core, and we put out some reasonable density values. But I look at what's happened in 10 years in the downtown core. How many high density buildings have actually been constructed in the downtown core? I can count 3. And then we have the new developments over in Charters and that area, which I think are great too. But only 3 high density buildings in the downtown core in the last 10 or more years. Those construction projects are great, but they're not enough. And they don't employ your children and my neighbors and my tradespeople, because with the greatest of respect, and we're all welcome for new economic input, the guys that build those projects are from Vancouver, Seattle, Saskatchewan. They're not Sooke people. They're not from this core. They have come in to take advantage of our community. So I have a child who just turned 22 years old. And I said, when she gets out of university, Chelsea, what are you going to do? She said, well, Dad, I'd really like, to save up, and her beau, we'd like to get a nice little piece of property and a house. And I can go on. I've got 6 kids. The youngest is 20. The oldest is 55. I don't know how she did that to me, but she did. Not one of them have ever said to me, Dad, I really, when I finish university, what I really want to do is go and buy a 700-foot condominium somewhere that I can live the rest of my life. And not one of them have said that. So look at what our children want and what our community, trades, professionals need. We need single family housing development. Until recently, I had no knowledge of this 100-acre estate. Had I probably would have been after it myself. Frankly, I think it's an opportunity for us as a community to provide good residential housing. That entire slope has done really well. I think it's something we can be proud of, probably much better than the developments I've done. I would say that they are. And I think it's the future that we have to look to. I mean, I'm an old guy. I'm 75 years old. I've probably only got another 50 or 60 years to go. But the young kids, the 20-year-olds, you and I were 20 once. Did we ever say, wow, I'm going to save up all my money after university, pay off my student loans, and then I'm going to go and buy a 600 or 700-foot condominium? Not bloody likely. We want a home. We want a little patch of land. We want a place where we can raise our families. And we want a place where our community can work and thrive. So while we debate the positives and negatives of the community plan, let's remember what it is that we really want in life. I don't want to be living in a 20-story condo. I don't think my kids do. I don't think your kids do. We all dream of our home that we want to build and live on and raise our family and have our cats and dogs and whatnot, because that's the dream. So maybe in your deliberations, we can keep those things in mind, that higher density of the downtown core is great. Down zoning, the west side or the northwest side of the municipality, not smart. That's our development growth area. We've got Sun River, we've got Church Road. Look what's going on there. Mayor, you and I have been down that path many a time. I put 100 homes on 20 acres and now there's 135 homes going on 10 acres. Well, that's just the way it is in the modern world.
Mr. Cowden, I need you to wind up. You're out of time.
Am I out of time?
Oh, yeah.
But you know what? I only come here very, very rarely. So maybe what I can say is.
I know.
Council-
Every speaker behind you will say the same.
And boy, you're happy that I only come rarely. Please, in your deliberations, think about the future. That's where we have to live our lives, not in the past. Thank you very much for your indulgence, Mayor, Council, staff.
Thank you for coming tonight, Mr. Cowden.
See you soon.
Until next time.
Susan Belford, I live in Sooke. I agree. We have to live our lives for the future. We have to build our town for the future. The future, our present is changing so fast that our future is becoming something that we can't quite imagine. For this reason, it's important for us to really think carefully before we start cavalierly saying, oh yeah, build on the hillside, take more trees down. Before we decide, oh yeah, it's okay, we don't need to worry about being a distance away from the foreshore. The Thwaites Glacier in Antarctica, it's called the Doomsday Glacier, because when it falls into the ocean, which is likely to be within the year or year and a half, it's going to raise sea levels by up to 15 meters. This is happening now. Our future is now. So yeah, we all want that little home and that yard and the kids and the dog. And what we want mostly is to ensure that we create a community that is livable for the long term and that doesn't commit us to having to undo a bunch of bad decisions made at the last minute by one faction of a community. We have to think about the entire community. Thank you. I'm wearing this because case numbers is going up again.
Thank you, Ms. Belford, and it's completely your choice, so thank you. Are there any remaining speakers tonight? I'm just mindful of the time, but I don't want to cut off anyone that wants to address council. So if it's on the OCP, this is it for tonight. Not it, but for tonight. Okay.
Hi, I'm Jewel Black and I'm from Sioux, Toronto originally, and I live over on Burr Road. Although this technically doesn't have anything to do with, well, not anything to do with the OCP, I just wanted to come up now because I felt like the conversation that just took place kind of warranted it. So I'm here this evening to speak about our future in our community. And we spoke earlier about our future leaders and building a school district that's safe and healthy. And I mentioned briefly the last time I spoke at this meeting about the school district employees that were forced onto unpaid leave as a result of not being willing to disclose their medical status. I had a quick talk with Ravi Parmar outside, and I just wanted to mention that although restrictions are easing and mandates are dropping, as recently mentioned, numbers are raising. So I want to just bring it before council and everyone, including our community members, that at this point in time, from top government all the way down.
Can you frame your conversation to the OCP, please?
Sure. So as far as future in the community, I have some concerns just about dialogue that is beginning to happen when people have differences of opinions and differences of viewpoints. So whether it's OCP and land and what is in that script or what is right and wrong within the community, period. So what I wanted to address today, and I didn't realize I had to sign up to say something.
You're not required to sign up. It's just your comments need to be relevant to the topic, which is the OCP.
Okay, so my concern with the OCP is that it is continuing to cause disruption in the community. Is that fair to say? That's why everyone came a couple of weeks ago, just because there were some concerns.
I don't think it's disruption. It's the fact that we're open to the public and we want to hear from the public and create a space where they can address council.
Excellent. So I'm so happy to hear that, because I am just hoping to open dialogue as far as community and the reality that I feel that within our own community, there is some segregation going on and some division. It has been mentioned in the school district that this is increasing amongst our students and that bullying and hatred is on the rise. I'm sorry if this is not exactly pertaining to the topic, but I just want to come and I'm hoping to encourage council and our community to start to consider ways of building bridges to encourage all members of community to feel a part of the community. My concern is, like stated, some people felt that they were not informed. Members of community do feel like they're being left out in various ways. So I just wanted to come and just say briefly that I'm hoping as a community that we can maybe start to encourage some involvement of all community members. And I wanted to put forth an idea that maybe we could have some kind of a function in our community that would welcome everybody, no restrictions, no showing of anything to have to attend. I feel that hatred is on the rise at the moment, starting from top government all the way down to our premier, and it's spreading, and I'm witnessing it myself on the streets.
Your worship, this is way off topic. I'm sorry. It may be a topic for another time, but this is not what we're here tonight for.
Okay, thank you, Ms.
Okay,
Black.
sorry, I thought I could come and speak to the community.
I think the point, Ms. Black, is we are hearing what you're saying. Council's objective, even in our strategic plan, is to be an open, safe space for all to attend, and the OCP addressed a lot of pieces around being more equitable, and we had some commentary about that, but to create a space for all to remain and to feel this is an inclusive, safe place. It's unfortunate that you're having a different experience. I've felt the same myself sometimes, so I totally respect where you're coming from. However, we are open to the public. It's just we have a procedure that we need to follow when we're here so that we can get through the materials in a reasonable time so people can get home.
Excellent. I was just hoping to wait until the very end because I just simply wanted to.
There is no open mic type of place. So we will have an open house that will, that everyone would be encouraged to attend. Canada Day is an open inclusive event. CD Saturday, this Saturday, I believe, doesn't have any restrictions at the museum. So there's, as we're opening, there's already been a rise of community activities that are planned where we can gather and be amongst one another. We're a compassionate community and we're doing our best.
Okay.
There's always room for improvement. Thank you very much.
Can I just?
No, we're
okay.
Thank you. But thank you.
I just wanted to remind council that generally committee of the whole meetings go until 10 o'clock unless there's a resolution to extend past that time. So just looking at the time.
We are on that hour now. where we do have a few outstanding pieces. So I'm going to ask council if you would like to complete after this item and refer the rest to a subsequent committee of the whole. Because there is the 5.5, 5.4, 5.3. Thank you to our staffer for hanging in to make that presentation. But that's up to council. I'll just ask, we have to make a decision on the OCP item that is on the floor tonight, and then we have the others. Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, I have no objections to going to 11 o'clock, but no further.
Okay. Okay, so there's no seconder, so you'll make a motion then to continue meeting past 10 o'clock.
Yes.
Okay. And there's no seconder, so I'll call the question on that. All those in favor then? Any opposed? Councillor Logan is opposed. Is it just majority, Ms. Temple?
It should be a 2/3 vote, which if my math is correct, would be 4 out of 5.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 4 of us. There's 5 of us here, correct? Right, gosh, I can't do my math tonight. Okay, so that carries and we're continuing on. Okay, so in the essence of time, that does conclude the OCP discussion piece. So I'm going to turn this back to council here. We do have a recommendation here in 2 parts. And that is that the committee of the whole recommend council receive this report for information, and that the committee of the whole recommend council direct staff to engage with the community further on the topics presented in the report. Moved by Councillor Logans. Speak to it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make it clear that the consultation with the community will not be solely on this report, but these items are important to us and we're bringing that forward. Anything that comes to us that's new about the OCP during the process is obviously welcome to be discussed.
Okay, other comments? Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, I've taken a lot of notes here. And to Mr. Callendon, who's unfortunately left, we're delighted that we have an audience again, right? That people are back here and that we're having some live time communication, which is fantastic. I'd just like to refer to Mr. Haldane's point about counselors and relationship with staff. My feeling all along has been that this is not a power over dynamic. This is a collaborative teamwork where there's mutual respect for professionals that we are paying significant money to and have gathered here. Pardon me? Is that enough on that subject?
No, sorry, I shouldn't have said anything. I just said that. Never
No,
mind.
but I think the key point here is that this is collaborative with staff, council, and the community at large. So let's keep that in mind. Whole bunch of other points, but I'll let it go at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bateman, and I agree. We all have our part in all of this, and decision-making requires public input. It's not just the staff report, it's not just the debate from council, it's also hearing the views from the public. And why are we, while it may appear to some that we're dragging this on, this is the first time council's had an opportunity to discuss this document and to understand it, and to discuss it in fairness to the public who can now actually come in and sit down. Before, it was hard to have meetings in either a hybrid way or even an electronic Zoom meeting. You just don't get the same exchange of information. 90% of our communication is nonverbal. It's impossible to see that on Zoom. We have breakdowns. Even my technology at home doesn't work. So it's hard to hear. It's hard to have a proper conversation. And I think it's reasonable that we do this type of work with the public present. That's what we're elected to do. That's why they say it's local government. Okay, on this note, I agree with Councillor Logans. Well, we needed some information that we could talk about. So having I like the diagrams. I look forward to some printed maps because those are very helpful, and it just gives us more information back, and information leads to more talking points and more questions. I think the staff addressed the concerns that we had at the last meeting, and as we get more, we can ask for more responses, or maybe even there's some committee notes that would answer that. So there's more to come on that. Anything further on this? Okay, I'll call the question then. All those in favor, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you. The next up is item 5.3. which is our review of integrated waste management for the district of Sooke. Sorry if I'm waving this in front of you, I just have the wrong glasses now.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is an update to the VDQ NRG presentation to the Committee of the Whole that I believe was done on January 20th of this, or 24th of this year. And it's provided as information. So to begin, just my thanks to our Climate Action Coordinator, Maya Carolsfeld, who wrote and researched this report. She's here today. So if there's any technical questions, she can answer those questions for us. So just some quick findings from the report. The proponents suggest that 40,000 metric tons of waste needs to be present to make the minimum viable project size. So they've stated that in their opinion, there's 135,000 metric tons of solid waste and another 167 metric tons of wood biomass within a 50-kilometer radius of Sooke. So it looks as though there's enough source material to make the project viable. But there was a May 2021 CRD report that concluded feedstock availability and the level of local industrial activity make the CRD an unsustainable location for a similar plant. And as well, any new facility that requires authorization under the Environment Management Act would trigger an amendment to the CRD solid waste management plan. And then just fourthly, one of the findings is that the circular economy strategy for the province will be launched sometime this year in 2022. So just briefly, a circular economy strategy will follow the 5 R's of pollution prevention hierarchy as shown on the screen. And in order to align with the province and the CRD, we in Sooke should participate in developing our own circular economy strategy. This will require action to increase reduction, reuse, and recycling streams. And this may have an effect on the single waste stream that a waste to energy facility would rely on to make their operations viable. Recovery, which is the 4th level on the hierarchy, is what's included where the waste to energy project is located. So just we will continue our discussions with VDQ Energy within the context of the contents of this report, and we'll report back to council at a subsequent meeting. But just to let council know, we were coming up with some conflicting information. We'll continue to drill down on this information. We'll report back to council. And with that, Your Worship, I'll leave you with the recommendation that the Committee of the Whole receive this report for information.
Thank you, Mr. McInnes. Councillor Beddoes? Just going to move it. Okay, Councillor Beddoes is moving that the Committee of the Whole receive the report for information. Anything to add? Nope. I just want to thank staff for the report. For some reason, it's not loading on my iPad right now, but I thought that it was really well researched and thoroughly laid out. I really appreciate the references to the CRD's Integrated Resource Management Advisory Committee. I actually chaired that committee, and it was an extremely technical, it was really technical work with agendas that were thousands of pages with a lot of scientific information. So what I liked about the staff report here is just you just grab the high points without a lot of this real technical, fascinating work, but without having the technical expertise, it was hard to process the information. But there was considerable work done there, and it's good to see it referenced, as well as the work that the CRD is doing. I think there was a lot of reference that as a region, we're doing a really good job recycling, but it's the reducing and reusing piece that they're really trying to work up. So then that diminished, and then that impacted the whole investment into this type of a facility that would require a continuous waste stream when we're looking at net zero and looking to reuse, repurpose, and all of that. It just didn't work. And there was, you know, like I said, it was 18 months of really technical work, exploring options everywhere, and then trying to find something that fit. So I really appreciate the report. It won't load, but that's okay. Anything else, Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, I wanted to thank staff for bringing this report forward, really put some context. I had a question regarding Mr. Kernaghan. Does he have a plan to return to Sioux as he promised he would? You heard any news on that?
Yes, I actually spoke with VDQ this morning and this afternoon. And their intent is to make a visit to Sooke next week as part of a trip to BC and then into Vancouver as well.
Okay. So I trust this agenda will be shared with the applicant.
Because this is a public agenda, I had shared this with them on Friday after this had been published last week. So they are aware of the contents of the report.
Okay, so yes, it was a really impressive report, and the fact that we have the CRD piece and Transition Sooke's excellent report, and the Zero Waste BC, both Transition Sooke and Zero Waste BC did this voluntarily. They came forward, gave us an analysis that undoubtedly would have cost a fortune. The Transition Sooke one at least. And I'm really impressed with the staff report again, that there's recommendations here for there's recommendations that can be built into the climate action plan that Ms. Carlsfeld is bringing forward. So bravo, thank you.
Yeah, well, that's great. Thank you. Okay, so I'll call the question then. All those in favor, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much, staff. Okay, next up is item 5.4, which is the naming of municipal assets and infrastructure policy.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council directed staff to draft a parks-specific naming policy in October of last year. This direction is consistent with recommendations in the Parks and Trails Master Plan, excerpts of which are included in the written staff report for reference. The district does have an existing street naming policy. Staff are recommending that provisions of the street naming policy be combined into an all-encompassing naming of municipal assets and infrastructure policy, which will include parks, presented for your review and endorsement this evening. In drafting this policy, staff referred to practices from other municipalities and have attempted to strike a balance between operational efficiency and council decision-making. Highlights of the new policy include implementation of a process to request that a district asset be named or renamed. An application form has been developed to accompany the policy. Staff discretion to assign names in certain instances, and a set series of considerations that must be met before a name is considered. In the case of a name request coming before council, this will ensure all relevant background is included in a request for decision. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have regarding the draft policy.
Thank you very much, Ms. Temple. Questions from members of council? Okay, sure. So the recommendation is then that the committee of the whole recommend council adopt the naming of municipal assets and infrastructure policy CO-19, and that the committee of the whole recommend council rescind street naming policy number 11.7. All right, moved by Councillor Bateman. Okay. Any comments? No? Okay, I'll call the.
You can't let a moment like this pass. This was hours and hours of work went into this thing. I'm sure it was based on best practices elsewhere. And it's also quite a leap forward on the previous policy, while also keeping our veterans part of this. It's remarkably inclusive document. So thank you.
Well said, Councillor Bateman. Thank you. Was your microphone on?
Probably not.
Okay, I'm not sure, but it was.
I appreciated it too.
It was very well articulated. Councillor Lachenes.
Councillor Bateman just said it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Temple. I'll now call the question. All those in favor, please? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Our final item tonight is 5.5, electronic meeting participation and etiquette policy. Over to staff.
So at the time of the most recent amendments to the council procedure bylaw, staff advised that a policy regarding electronic meeting etiquette would be forthcoming. The policy presented here tonight is to provide clarity regarding expectations for electronic meeting participation. The policy has been drafted in accordance with a recently published provincial best practices guide, as well as the district's own evolution over the past few years. It's hoped that adopting this policy will provide a commonly understood set of practices for all meeting participants. Again, I'm happy to take any questions.
Just my comment would be, it'd be interesting now that we've had this experience to develop a policy, like, you know, it seems afterwards, but could we have developed a policy at the start of this, not knowing how things would play, right? So hopefully there would only be minimal times, but it still allows, what this does, it does allow for a member of council who may be ill and unable to attend or on vacation or two or more sometimes, for us to have quorum to be able to still hold the meeting, which we couldn't do before with different types of technology, and follow process as best as we can. So I'm hoping we don't end up in a scenario where we're all back in our Zoom and our Teams boxes or Zoom boxes again, but who knows, right? We just don't know what's coming sometimes. So we're prepared this time. Go ahead, Councillor Logans.
Question through you to staff on the very first item is in general, is that everyone must meet 10 minutes before. If they don't, what is the if you're there 9 minutes before, do you not get to be part of the meeting?
That's a good question.
That is a great question. Thank you.
Yes.
Because it's a policy, it's just to set an expectation, and it's more of a something to strive towards. But no, the meeting quorum doesn't start until the meeting is called to order. So no, that you would still be allowed to participate.
I think it's fair that even as we're all getting more equipped to the tools, there still is the all-out technology fail that happens at the last minute. That happened to me the other day. And then I got locked out. You got to reboot. You need the code. You forget the code, you know.
Yes, Your Worship, the other thing is the resource end of it. So just to have everything set, not at the 11th hour, 1 minute before the meeting starts, but just to give some comfort to right now the corporate officer who's wearing many hats in this arena.
And I think it does, as all counselors have already done, they've already messaged when they're going to be participating virtually, so that in enough time. So I think that's helped. And then like tonight, it was the case of, we just knew that, and Councillor Logan's arrived on time. We didn't even have to fuss about it. Right? Exactly. So these things happen. It's the same. We get here, things happen. We might run in late, and then there's a process on how long we wait to achieve quorum before continuing. And usually we're already messaging each other. So it's to set guidelines, and then hopefully the next council will also allow their colleagues, you know, reach out, call, where are they, what's happening, as we've done. Okay, great. So the recommendation is that the committee of the whole recommend council adopt the electronic meeting participation and etiquette policy, CO-020. Moved by Councillor Lajeunesse. All right, would you like to speak to it?
No, I'm good. I just want to thank staff for the work that they've done on this, and it looks all very commonsensical.
We may find something down the road, but we'll deal with it then. Okay, I'll call the question then. All those in favor, please. That's unanimous. Thank you very much, staff. I see there's no new business, so I'll just call for a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Lajeunesse again. All right. Would you like to speak to it? No, all those in favor? And that's unanimous. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and take good care, all of you. Thank you.